What if the women of the medieval era, those you thought were mere shadows in heavy gowns, were the architects of a hidden revolution? The truth will snatch your breath. The whispers of history are louder than you think. Picture this, a world where cloistered nuns wielded power like secret sorceresses, where peasants concocted potions under the watchful eyes of the moon, and the very fabric of society trembled at the thought of a woman with ambition. You think you know? You know nothing. Forget the fairy tales and the sanitized pages of history books. The pulse of medieval life throbbed with scandal, ambition, and the razor edge of survival. Women, forgotten yet fierce, sketched lives cloaked in plots thicker than any tapestry. A lady of the court, one moment she's charming nobleman, the next, she's orchestrating deadly intrigues that make Game of Thrones look like child's play. Did you think they were simply pawns? They were queens in disguise, masked in silk but armed with cunning sharper than the finest sword. Take, for instance, Hildegard of Bingen, a nun whose visions were so electrifying that they ignited the very foundations of theology. Or Joan of Arc, not just a warrior, but a living battle cry, her voice echoed like cannon fire across the fields of France. How did they navigate a world that sought to silence them? Their stories are not mere footnotes, they are the adrenaline-fueled scorch marks on the pages of history. Imagine a tavern filled with laughter and shadows, a clandestine meeting of women plotting the next upheaval. Their laughter, sharp, defiant, echoes against the wooden beams. Behind the bar, a woman serving ale hides her own secrets, concocting brews that could either heal or kill. She grins. What's the difference when survival is the name of the game? Let's talk about the witches. Yes, those infamous figures whose mere name could incite terror. But what if they weren't the monsters the church painted them to be? What if they were simply women, powerful, misunderstood, who dared to tread where men feared to walk? Each accused witch, each trial, a drop of poison in the chalice of history, a reminder that the stakes for women were life and death. And the Beguines, those free-spirited women who defied societal expectations, creating communities where they could live, love, and thrive. A whisper, what if they were the original feminists, rewriting the rules of existence? Every story, a dagger aimed at convention. Every woman, a spark waiting for the right moment to ignite an inferno. The medieval world is a treacherous garden, choked with thorns, and the women within it, resilient flora, sprouted where their very existence was an act of rebellion. So, are you ready to confront the truth? This isn't a history lesson, it's a revelation. A beckoning abyss, where every turn reveals a woman who dared to defy. You can't look away now. The tapestry unravels, and the figures stitched into the fabric of time beckon you closer. These are not just stories, they are battle cries, begging to be heard. Who will answer? The sun hung low, a molten orb dripping red across the sky as Amina knelt in the parched earth, her hands trembling with the weight of unripe dreams. The field stretched like a vast, unforgiving sea of beige, a desolate blanket that whispered secrets of toil and sweat. Each grain of sand that slipped between her fingers felt like the echoes of her ancestors, their stories woven into the very fibers of the land. But today was different. Today, the air crackled with tension, heavy and electric, as the distant thunder of hooves drew closer. Hashim, she called, her voice a fraying thread of desperation that barely carried over the wind. Her son, barely 10, was scampering around, his laughter a buoyant note against the oppressive silence. But the laughter felt hollow, a stark reminder of the joy that once danced freely in these fields, now stifled under the weight of worry. The shadows of the trees flickered like restless spirits, and for a fleeting moment, Amina's heart raced with foreboding. Something was coming, something dark and inevitable. Hashim paused, peering into the distance. His wide, innocent eyes were portals to a world untouched by the harsh realities that clung to his mother like a second skin. "What is it, Mama?" he asked, oblivious to the storm brewing in her chest. She wished she could tell him that the world was still filled with magic, that the crops would flourish, that the village would thrive. But reality, with its cruel smile, often taunted her with truths she could not share. Amina remembered the stories her mother told, tales of women like her, strong yet invisible, bearing the weight of the earth on their shoulders, hidden behind the veil of tradition and expectation. "I remember," she whispered, "when the sun kissed the soil and our laughter filled these fields." But now, it was as if the land had turned its back, a fickle mistress mocking her efforts. The crops refused to grow, and the silence was a suffocating blanket. Across the village, Fatima stood under the swaying branches of an ancient olive tree, her hands shaking as she tied bundles of dried herbs. Her heart thudded with a rhythm of its own, caught between duty and desire. She glanced toward the horizon, where the mountains loomed like silent sentinels, their presence both comforting and ominous. The whispers in her mind grew louder, echoes of a life half-lived, a yearning for freedom wrapped in the chains of responsibility. A storm of doubts brewed within her. She was a mother, a wife, but who was she beyond that? I remember, she thought, images swirling in her mind, dancing beneath the stars, the wild laughter of friends echoing through the night. The weight of her husband's expectations pressed down like a stone, and the pulse of her own aspirations felt like a distant echo, fading with each passing day. Am I nothing but a ghost in my own life? Suddenly, the ground trembled with the pounding of horses, and Amina's heart lurched. She grabbed Hashim's hand, their connection a lifeline in the chaos. They stood frozen as a group of men rode into view, faces hardened, eyes cold as steel. The village watchmen, their presence a harbinger of doom. For months, they had threatened to take what little land they had left, to seize the fruits of their labor for debts that felt as insatiable as the earth itself. "Move aside, woman," barked one of the men, his voice a serrated edge that cut through the air. "This land belongs to those who can afford to farm it." Amina's breath caught in her throat, a wild animal trapped in a snare. She could feel Hashim's small hand tighten around hers, a mirror of her own fear. "But we are the land," she wanted to scream. "We are the heartbeat of this soil." Fatima watched from a distance, her heart racing as she gripped the herbs, fingers trembling. The scene was a tapestry of emotions, weaving together sorrow and anger, hope and despair. She stepped forward, compelled by a force greater than herself. "No," she shouted, her voice rising above the din, raw and fierce. "We will not let you take what is ours." The men turned, surprise flickering across their faces, followed by contempt. "And what do you intend to do, woman? Fight us with your herbs." The laughter that followed sliced through the air, a chilling reminder of their power over her, over them. But Fatima stood firm, her heart pounding like a war drum. "These herbs are our lifeblood. They heal, they nourish. We are not invisible." Amina's heart swelled with a fierce pride, and for a moment, the fear faded. The air crackled with something electric, something that felt like the stirring of a revolution. She took a step forward, her voice rising, "We are the ones who sow, who nurture. We give life to this land." Hashim squeezed her hand, his innocence a beacon of strength. She could see it in the eyes of the other women who had gathered, a flicker of resolve igniting in the shadows of doubt. The world was not merely a canvas for their suffering, it was a stage for their resilience. In that moment, the past flooded back, stories of women who had fought, who had bled, who had whispered their dreams into the soil, only to have them sprout in defiance of darkness. "I remember," Amina breathed, "the tales of our mothers, the warriors who walked before us." And the men, momentarily stunned, felt the tide turn. The whispers of centuries echoed through her words, wrapping around her like a shield. The women were no longer just the invisible laborers of the earth, they were the heart of it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of despair and defiance, a new chapter loomed over the village. The weight of their struggles hung in the air, but so did the shimmer of hope, fragile yet unyielding. They stood together, a storm brewing within, ready to face the darkness that sought to swallow them whole. With every heartbeat, the women transformed from shadows into warriors, their voices rising in unison against the night, a chorus of resilience that echoed through the land. The invisible became visible, and in that powerful moment of confrontation, the cycle of fear and silence began to shatter, like glass against stone. The struggle was far from over, but they stood ready to fight back, ready to reclaim the soil that was theirs by birthright. And so, the tension crackled, the air thick with unresolved anger and unyielding hope, as the dance of labor and love continued, the cycle never truly ending, always weaving back into the fabric of existence, always fighting for a future yet unwritten. The stone walls of the keep trembled with a silence so thick, it felt like a weight pressing down upon my very soul. I stood there, heart racing, the flickering torchlight casting erratic shadows that danced along the cold, damp stones. My breath hitched, a mere whisper against the oppressive stillness. It was here, in this hushed chamber, that the fate of my family teetered on the edge of oblivion. Dread coiled in my stomach, a serpent biting its own tail, as I listened for the sound of hurried footsteps, the clattering of armor, or the crack of a blade being unsheathed. Marcella, my cousin, stood beside me, her hands clenched into fists so tight that her knuckles blanched against the dark, fraying fabric of her gown. "We cannot let them take what is ours," she hissed, a fire igniting in her eyes. She was fierce, a wild tempest in a world that sought to silence her, but even she felt the cold fingers of fear sliding into her heart. I clutched her shoulder, a silent promise passing between us. If the wolves came to our door, we would not hide. We would not cower. But the walls of the feudal stronghold whispered secrets we couldn't hear. Shadows moved in the periphery, and I could feel the weight of their gazes, those of men with greed written in the lines of their faces, who believed power lay solely in their grasp. Lords and knights, they would never understand the true strength of a noble woman like Marcella, nor the resolve that simmered within me. We were more than mere pawns in their games, we were the storm brewing, the undercurrents that could sweep them away if only they dared to underestimate us. I remember the last banquet, the clinking of goblets ringing like a morose chime in my ears, laughter punctuating the air, while I sat with a forced smile, my thoughts spiraling into the depths of despair. They bathe once a year. So yeah, romance was earthy, I had quipped to Marcella, trying to mask my growing discontent. However, the jest only deepened my sorrow. We were surrounded by men who held power as a shield, wielding it as carelessly as children tossing stones into a pond, unaware of the ripples that spread far and wide. I wanted to scream, to flay the truth from the hearts of these men. Noble women were not mere vessels for alliances or breeding stock to bolster their legacies. We were the architects of fate, the keepers of secrets, the ones who stitched the torn fabric of society together with threads of cunning and resolve. "Listen," Marcella whispered, her voice a low tremor. "What if we—" But I cut her off, a cold shiver racing down my spine. I remembered the flicker of a silhouette in the hall, uninvited and unwelcome. The air thickened as if the walls themselves were eavesdropping. "No, we cannot act recklessly," I warned, my heart pounding like a war drum. "They are biding their time, plotting in the dark while we wrestle with our whispered fears." Yet beneath the layers of dread, there flickered a spark, a memory of last summer when our laughter echoed through sunlit fields, and freedom felt tangible, as if we could grasp it with our hands. I remember the softness of the grass beneath my fingers, the intoxicating scent of blossoming wildflowers. The world had seemed so vast, so full of possibilities. Now, it felt like a cage, its bars forged from the very expectations that sought to bind us. Marcella's gaze met mine, and in that moment, I saw the flicker of rebellion, an ember waiting to ignite into a flame. She had a plan, one forged in the crucible of need and desire. "What if we gather the other women? The ones who feel this weight too?" Her voice trembled with urgency. "What if we rise?" "Rise?" My voice barely rose above a whisper. The very thought sent shivers through my spine. The echoes of history loomed large, tales of women who had dared to defy the order, only to find themselves ensnared in the jaws of retribution. "You think they'll listen to us? They'll crush us without a thought, without remorse." But I could see it, the vision shimmering in her eyes, a kaleidoscope of possibility. We could be more than shadows flitting through the halls of the feudal lords. We could be the tempest that rages against the dark. A fear settled in my chest, a question hanging heavy: what would it cost us? What if our cries went unheard, swallowed by the echoing silence of a world that cared only for the clang of swords and the weight of gold? "Then we will make them listen." Marcella's voice was steel wrapped in silk, a fierce declaration that sent warmth cascading over the chill. "We will carve our names into the stones of this keep, so that even the ghosts will remember who we are." Her resolute spirit ignited a surging tide within my heart, a swell of passion that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. I squeezed her hand, a pact forged in the shadows. Our plan spun like threads in a loom, intricate and fraught with danger. Each heartbeat reverberated with the promise of change, of defiance against a system that had long relegated us to the role of mere spectators in our own lives. But time, that relentless spectre, was not on our side. The clock ticked away, each second a reminder that we stood on the precipice of an uncertain future. I could feel the weight of the world pressing on my chest, a reminder that every decision had consequences. Then came the clash of armor, a sound sharp enough to cleave the air. My heart stopped. The wolves were at the door. I turned to Marcella, fear and determination intertwined. If we're to face them, let it be on our terms. No more hiding. And with that, I felt the tide shift, the current of fate pulling us toward an inevitable confrontation, one that would force us to grapple not just with the men who sought to dominate us but with the very essence of our womanhood, our power, and our right to carve a place in a world that had long denied us a voice. The storm rumbled in the distance, and with it, the promise of change. Every heartbeat echoed with the question, would we rise, or would we fall? The wind howled, a banshee wail tearing through the night, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and despair. Inside the cramped, earthen-walled cottage, the flickering light of a single candle illuminated the faces of 3 women, each carrying the weight of the world in their eyes. Outside, the storm raged, but within these walls, the real tempest brewed, a storm of fear, uncertainty, and a longing that clawed at their chests like a ravenous beast. I remember the moment vividly. The sound of the door slamming against the wall reverberated in my bones as Elspeth stumbled in, her clothes clinging to her like a second skin, soaked through with rain and terror. "They're coming," she gasped, her breath coming in quick, sharp bursts, the words laced with the bitterness of panic. Her wild eyes darted around the room, seeking refuge from a truth that threatened to engulf us. I, Aisling, stood frozen, clutching a frayed piece of cloth, a remnant of my mother, feeling the edges fray under my fingertips as if I could stitch together the chaos surrounding us. "Who's coming?" I whispered, a futile attempt to hold back the rising tide of dread that filled the air like smoke. "Men," she spat, the word dripping with venom, "men with weapons and fire. They want our land, our lives. They want everything." And there, in that moment, I felt the suffocating grip of history tightening around our necks, a noose woven from centuries of oppression and struggle, each twist a tale of heartbreak and resilience. The stories of our mothers, our grandmothers, echoed through me, the ghosts of women who had weathered storms far worse than this, their laughter now a distant memory, replaced by the sharp edges of survival. Beside me, Mairead, the elder of our trio, clutched her rosary beads like a lifeline, her knuckles white with fear. "Pray," she murmured, her eyes fixed on the flickering flame as if it were a beacon of hope in this darkened world. "Pray for deliverance." But I could see it in her eyes, the doubt, the weariness that clung to her like the dampness of the air. "Prayers won't save us, Mairead," I snapped, the frustration bubbling over, an eruption of emotions I could no longer contain. I could almost sense the spirits of our ancestors hovering, offering silent judgment, their whispers woven into the fabric of our lives. We need to fight. We can't just sit here and wait for them to take everything. Elspeth shot me a look, her brow furrowing, the fire of defiance igniting in her core. "Fight? With what? Our hands? Our dreams?" She laughed, a hollow sound that echoed against the walls like a warning bell. "You think they care about our struggle? They'll burn this place to the ground before we even raise a finger." But there was a spark, a flicker of rebellion in her tone that thrummed through me like a heartbeat. I could feel it, a pulse of life amid the shadows, a reminder of our strength, our legacy of survival. "The land is ours," I said, my voice trembling with conviction. "It has always been ours. And if we let them take it without a fight, then what are we? Shadows of the women who came before us." The air in the room crackled with tension, laden with the weight of our choices. Outside, the wind howled again, a cruel reminder of the world beyond our fragile sanctuary, and yet within these walls, we were steeped in a moment of fierce clarity. "I remember," Mairead said suddenly, her voice trembling but resolute. "I remember the stories my mother told me. The way she fought for every inch of soil, how she used her tears to water the ground when the crops failed, how she turned despair into strength." Elspeth's gaze softened, and for a fleeting moment, the flicker in her eyes was not just fear, it was recognition. What if we gathered the others, she suggested, her voice steadier now, a plan igniting in her mind like a spark in the dark. What if we made a stand? But doubt crept in like a fog, wrapping itself around my heart. And what then? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What if we fail? Then we fail together, Mairead replied, her eyes fierce, the flame of determination drawing her to her full height. But we will not go quietly into the night. We will not let our story end in silence. The weight of her words hung in the air, an unbreakable bond forming between us, a tether forged in the fires of fear and hope. I could feel the gravity of our decision wrapping around us, the world outside slipping further away as we stepped into the abyss together. Time stretched in that moment, the seconds pulsating like the desperate beat of a drum. The storm outside mirrored the tempest within, each clap of thunder a reminder of the stakes at hand. We would gather the women, the brave and the broken, and together we would form an unyielding force against the tide that sought to sweep us away. I could see it all unfolding in my mind, a tapestry of strength and sisterhood woven together by the threads of our shared plight. And as the first raindrop struck the window, I felt a surge of something powerful rise within me, an echo of defiance that coursed through my veins like fire. Then let's do it, Elspeth said, her voice like steel now. Let's fight for what is ours. Outside, the storm raged on, a primal roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. But inside, we stood united, three women bound by blood, struggle, and unshakable resolve, our hearts beating as one against the cold winds of fate. And as the candle flickered, casting shadows that danced on the walls, I felt the weight of history upon us, the struggles of countless women before us, their spirits whispering through the storm, urging us to rise, to resist, to carve our names into the annals of time. With that, I knew, though fear laced every breath, we would not waver. The night was ours, and with it, the promise of resilience. In the hushed, sacred heart of the convent, the air is heavy with unspoken words. Sister Agnes stands at the threshold, her fingers trembling against the cool wooden door, the faint scent of candle wax clinging to her like a shroud. Outside, the world is dying in the grip of autumn, the trees, stripped bare, look like weary soldiers awaiting the chill of winter. Inside, the choir's hymn swells, a haunting melody, sweet and sharp, cutting through the silence, and for a moment, she remembers the vibrant life that pulsed through her veins before the vow of silence took hold. She swallows hard, the weight of her choice clawing at her insides. The echoes of laughter, the warmth of sun-drenched afternoons, all lost in the corridors of her mind where shadows whisper secrets of what could have been. I remember, she breathes, the words slipping free like a prayer unuttered. I remember the taste of freedom. The thought sends a shiver down her spine. Not far from her, in the cold stone chapel, Sister Clara kneels, her brow furrowed in deep contemplation. The flickering candlelight dances around her, illuminating the haunted look in her eyes. She had seen visions, specters that tore at the fabric of her reality. God speaks to me in colors, she often says, and in this moment, she is consumed by a violent tempest of emotions, joy, despair, longing. The flickers of those colors swirl around her, shifting forms, haunting her with the haunting faces of the lost. Come to me, Clara, the ghosts whisper, their voices like the rustle of dead leaves. Come to us. Come back. The fear grips her, a vice around her heart. To leave the sacred walls would mean surrendering to the chaos of the world outside, a world she has tried so hard to escape. But the pull is fierce, a gravity that draws her closer to the edge of the abyss, the darkness that promises both liberation and destruction. In the same shadowed space, Sister Margaret watches them both, a spectre herself, her body rooted but her soul wandering, searching for a sign amid the chaos. She is the keeper of secrets, the guardian of their unspoken bonds. Time slips through her fingers like sand, each grain a moment lost, each moment a tether to the lives they abandoned. I remember, she whispers to the flickering candles, I remember the sound of my mother's laughter, the warmth of her embrace. The memories are both a balm and a blade, slicing into her heart, reminding her of the cost of devotion. As the hours crawl, the clock ticks, a relentless reminder of time's passing, a countdown to an unknown reckoning. Shadows stretch and twist in the dim light, creating phantoms that dance just beyond reach. The three women share a bond forged in sacrifice, but the chains they wear are shackles of their own making. How long can we hold on? Sister Agnes asks, breaking the silence, her voice trembling yet defiant. How long until this silence becomes a tomb? The words hang heavy in the air, a challenge tossed into the void. Clara looks up, her eyes wide and bright with unshed tears. I am not afraid, she insists, though the quiver in her voice betrays her. I will not let fear rule me. Not anymore. But deep down, she feels the shadows closing in, a gnawing dread that whispers of betrayal and abandonment. Margaret steps forward, her heart pounding in her chest. You must confront the darkness within, or it will consume you, she warns, each word punctuated by the weight of her own unspoken fears. She knows what lurks beneath the surface, the thoughts, the doubts, the memories that linger like ghosts in the corners of their minds. We are more than our vows. We are flesh and blood, we are dreams and fears. The truth hangs in the air like a ghost, a tether to their humanity. Outside, the wind howls like a banshee, rattling the shutters, a chaotic symphony that mirrors the turmoil inside. The world is changing, encroaching upon their sacred sanctuary. A protest erupts in the streets, the cries of the masses echoing through the stone walls, a cacophony of rebellion, of voices raised against oppression. They want us to choose, Agnes says, trembling at the thought. To join or to stand apart. For a moment, they are suspended in time, the weight of the decision pressing down on them like the heavy stone of the altar. The candles flicker as if caught in a gust, shadows dancing wildly, illuminating the faces of the women who are all too aware of the implications of their silence. What is faith? Clara whispers, and the question reverberates through the chapel, raising the hairs on the back of Agnes's neck. Is it the sanctuary we build within ourselves, or the one we create with others? Margaret's heart races. It's both, she breathes. It's our bonds, our strength. But in her chest, a storm brews, dark tendrils of doubt wrapping tightly around her heart. What if they are only chains? I don't want chains. I want wings, Clara cries, her voice breaking under the weight of her own yearning. I want to fly beyond these walls. Agnes feels the gravity of Clara's words pull her closer, igniting a yearning deep within her. A fire that had been smoldering beneath the surface, now roaring to life. But at what cost? The shadows flicker, the candle flame sputtering in answer. The tension swells, an electric current thrumming between them, binding their fates together. Each breath becomes a prayer, a silent plea to the cosmos that looms overhead, indifferent and vast. Time stretches, contracts, dissolves, all at once, they are haunted by the weight of their choices. The weight of their silence. The weight of their desire. The clock ticks, and in that moment, each heartbeat is a reminder that the world outside is waiting, demanding, begging for them to choose. Outside, the night is alive with shouting voices, the pulse of revolution echoing through the dimly lit corridors of the convent. The candle flames flicker, and in their quivering light, the three women stand on the precipice of a reckoning, their hearts beating as one. They are bound, yet unbound, trapped within the walls of their vows, yet yearning for the freedom that lies just beyond. Together, Margaret whispers, the word pooling in the space between them, heavy with possibility. We will face it together. The wind howls louder, a clarion call to the silent souls waiting on the brink, as they take a step forward into the darkness, hands trembling but resolute. And in that moment, they become more than nuns, more than sisters, they become warriors of their own fate, ready to confront the shadows that dance at the edges of their dreams. The world outside is alive with chaos, and they are caught within the storm, but they will not be silent. The silence is broken, a new song rising to drown out the shadows, grief, hope, longing, liberation, all twisted together in a symphony of life. The time has come for them to find their voices again, to reclaim their stories from the ghosts of the past, and step boldly into the unknown. And as the shadows writhe and twist in the dim light, they know this is only the beginning. I remember the moment the scream pierced the twilight, a jagged shard of terror slicing through the heavy air. Agatha stood frozen, her hand stained with the remnants of bread dough, the world narrowing down to a single horrifying thought: what had become of her child? The fire crackled in the hearth, casting grotesque shadows that danced like wraiths on the stone walls, mocking her frantic heart. Where is she? The words clawed at her throat, raw and desperate. The kitchen, usually a sanctuary filled with the warmth of baked bread and laughter, now felt like a tomb echoing with the ghosts of unfulfilled dreams. She could almost feel the weight of her husband's disappointed gaze, could almost hear the murmurs of the village women, their whispers swirling like the smoke that curled from the fireplace. A wife should know where her children are. Those words hung in the air, heavy and accusing. It was then that the door swung open, a gust of cold wind rushing in, snuffing out the last flickers of warmth. Her husband, Thomas, stumbled in, eyes wide, face pale, as if he had seen the spectre of death himself. "The market, it's chaos," he gasped, breathless with fear. "They say the plague has come." Agatha's heart clenched. A mother's instinct seized her, igniting a firestorm of dread. The village had whispered of sickness, of bodies piled in carts like discarded grains. "Where is my daughter?" Her voice trembled, a fragile thread hanging by a single unraveling strand. Thomas took a step back, as if her words were a tangible wound. "I don't know." "No one knows." The weight of his helplessness sank deep into the pit of her stomach. His eyes, usually so steadfast, now flickered with uncertainty, and Agatha felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She remembered her dreams, vivid and haunting, her daughter running through fields of daisies, laughter spilling like sunlight. But now, those dreams felt like a graveyard of memories, each one a reminder of what could be lost. "We have to find her." We must," she gasped, urgency clawing at her insides. "Agatha, listen." Thomas's voice was a low rumble, but it filled the room with an irrefutable power. "The town is in disarray. People are turning against each other. We must stay inside. For her sake." The weight of that statement crushed her, a boulder of despair. Agatha's gaze fell on the worn cradle in the corner, a symbol of hope now shadowed with the threat of mortality. Every ticking second felt like a countdown to something unimaginable. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, silence enveloped the room. Agatha could hear the beat of her own heart, thumping like a war drum, drowning out the whispers of the past. She felt the cold sting of fear, a phantom shiver dancing down her spine. What if she's... No. She wouldn't, let that thought linger. The walls closed in, and she felt the spectre of despair wrapping its icy fingers around her throat. Memories flooded her mind, how her daughter had clung to her skirts, a wildflower in a world of thorns, weaving tales of knights and dragons. "I remember," Agatha whispered, her voice trembling. "I remember the way she danced to the sound of the wind. I remember her laughter." Thomas's gaze softened, but the unspoken truth loomed between them like a tempest, a chasm that threatened to swallow them whole. "Agatha, we need to stay strong." But strength felt like a distant memory, a flicker of light in an abyss of darkness. In that heavy stillness, a sound broke through, a soft knock. The door creaked open, revealing a figure cloaked in shadows, a grim harbinger of the chaos beyond. It was Helen, a neighbor, her face pale and drawn, eyes wide with a fear that resonated in Agatha's very bones. "It's worse than we thought," she gasped, clutching a bundle to her chest. "They're saying no child is safe." Agatha's breath caught. The air became thick, suffocating. "What do you mean?" she whispered, the words barely escaping her lips. "They've taken some children. The sickness, it's not just the plague. There are rumors of something darker, something they can't explain." Helen's voice trembled, each word laced with terror, spinning a web of dread that ensnared them both. The shadows in the room seemed to pulse, alive with the dread of 1,000 unspoken fears. Agatha felt a hot wave of anger and grief rise within her, a tempest threatening to spill over. "We won't let them take her," she declared, a fierce resolve igniting her spirit. "We will fight." But Thomas's eyes clouded with doubt. "What can we do against such darkness? We can barely protect ourselves." "Then we protect her together," Agatha insisted, the fire in her heart flaring for the daughter who danced through her dreams, who deserved to know the joy of sunlight and laughter. In that moment, she became a lioness, fierce and unyielding, ready to claw through hell itself for her child. Suddenly, a rush of memories crashed over her, each one a thread weaving into the tapestry of her life. The time she had kissed her daughter goodnight, the stories they spun together, the quiet moments that now felt like a lifetime away. "I remember," Agatha said, her voice steadying, "the day she was born. The way the sun poured through the window, lighting up her tiny face. But in this moment, that memory was tainted with fear, uncertainty clawing at her heart like a ravenous beast." They stood at the precipice, the edge of a haunting abyss, and the cries of their world echoed in their ears, a grim symphony of despair that felt all too familiar. "Agatha, we need to leave." Thomas's voice broke her reverie, and she felt the cold grip of reality. "We need to find her before it's too late." And with that, the air in the room shifted, heavy with anticipation. The clock ticked ominously in the background, each second a reminder of the fragility of life. Agatha took a breath that felt like fire, the weight of her love for her daughter igniting a determination she had never known. They stepped back into the world where shadows loomed large, where whispers of madness danced on the wind. But in the depths of Agatha's heart, a fierce flame burned brightly, a promise that no darkness could extinguish. As they stepped into the night, the stars blinked overhead, distant and cold, and she found herself wondering if they would ever find their way back. The grip of uncertainty tightened, but she knew one thing: they were mothers and wives, and in that moment, they were warriors, ready to face the storm. And the echoes of their determination resonated through the stillness, a vow to confront the nightmares lurking at the edge of their reality. The shadows gathered, thick and suffocating, but Agatha felt a flicker of hope in her chest, a fire that refused to be snuffed. She was a mother, after all, and mothers do not falter. The moon hung low, a silver coin skewered by the claws of blackened trees, their branches reaching like skeletal fingers toward the sky. The air was thick, saturated with the scent of damp earth and something acrid, a whisper of decay that clung to the edges of night. I stood there, heart racing, pulse drumming in my ears, as shrill cries echoed through the darkness, a woman, her voice trembling with an agony that pierced the veil of silence. In that moment, the world fell away, and all that existed was her pain, raw and palpable, a living thing. I remember her face, illuminated by the flickering candlelight, a canvas of fear and desperation. Her name was Ilara, a healer born to the shadows of this village, a woman who knew the secrets of the earth as intimately as she knew her own flesh. The villagers trusted her, yet here she was, knuckles white around a bundle of herbs, trembling as she prepared a remedy for a dying child. Fever raged in the boy's small body, his breath shallow, each one dragging like the last remnants of life fighting against the inevitable. "Ilara, please!" A voice broke through the haze, a frantic plea from the boy's mother, eyes wide with terror. "Can't you do something? You're our only hope." Her hand shook as she crushed the leaves, the sharp scent of rosemary mingling with the bitter taste of fear. I could see the doubt in her eyes, a flicker of uncertainty that threatened to consume her. The weight of expectation bore down on her like a stone, and in that moment, I saw her not as a healer, but as a woman caught in the web of her own limitations, the suffocating grasp of reality closing in. "I remember when I first began," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper, "the way the elder women taught me, their hands worn and wise, telling stories of plants and poultices under the glow of the hearth. They spoke of healing and death with the same reverence. They were not afraid. But Ilara was afraid of failing, of facing the wrath of those who depended on her, of losing the one thing that tethered her to this world. In the nightmares that haunted her sleep, she saw the faces of those she couldn't save, their eyes hollow, their souls slipping through her fingers like sand. Beside her stood Mara, fierce and unyielding, the fire of her spirit flickering like the candle's flame. "You can do this," she urged, her voice a battle cry against the encroaching shadows. "You are stronger than you know. Remember the night under the stars, the way we gathered the wildflowers? How they danced in the wind." Mara's eyes blazed with something electric, a primal force that ignited the air around us, yet I saw the flicker of fear behind her bravado. She was Ilara's anchor, yet also the tempest, a mirror reflecting the tumult within. They bore the scars of their shared history, women forged in the crucible of hardship and loss, and now they stood on the precipice of despair, the child's life hanging in the balance like a fragile thread. What did it mean to heal? I had often asked myself as I watched them, two women against a backdrop of suffering. It was a dance of shadows and light, a delicate balance between hope and helplessness. I felt the pressure building, the unspoken weight of unfulfilled dreams and the burden of expectation thickening the air. The boys' breaths grew more erratic, a staccato rhythm that thundered inside my chest, echoing the drum of possibility dwindling into silence. I remember, Ilara said, her voice breaking, the old tales, the ones that spoke of women like us, wielding herbs and whispers, bending the very fabric of life itself. They told of power, but they also told of sacrifice. Her eyes flicked to the boy, a mirror of innocence, and I could almost hear the haunting refrain of loss lurking in the corners of her heart. Sacrifice, Mara echoed, her fists clenched, nails digging into her palms, almost drawing blood. But not tonight. Not here. We will not let the darkness win. She stepped forward, taking the herbs from Ilara, her hand steady, resolute. We are not mere shadows. We are the light. And as she ground the herbs into a paste, I felt a shift in the air, a tremor of possibility. The earth itself seemed to hold its breath, time suspended in a surreal ballet of fear and hope. The mother's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, each blink a prayer for salvation, for a miracle that felt just out of reach. Ilara watched Mara, a flicker of admiration cutting through her doubt, and something uncoiled within her. Together, she breathed, and the word hung between them, a lifeline thrown into the abyss. Together, they echoed, their voices intertwining like roots beneath the surface, drawing strength from one another. As Mara administered the paste, I felt the air crackle with energy. It was as if the very fabric of life was being woven anew, threads of light intertwining with shadows, the healer's art a tapestry of resilience and love. The boy's breath slowed, and for a heartbeat, the world held its breath, suspended in a moment that felt both infinite and fleeting. But then, from the depths of the shadows, a gust of wind howled, a reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the flickering light. I could sense it, a cold tendril of despair twisting around hope, a reminder that healing was not always a victory, nor was it ever guaranteed. Ilara's voice trembled as she whispered, "What if we fail?" The fear was a spectre, a ghost that haunted every healer, every woman who dared to wield power in a world that often sought to silence them. But Mara's grip tightened, fierce and unyielding. We will not fail because we will not be alone. We carry the weight of each other, the weight of every woman who came before us. We are their echoes. In that moment, the candle flickered violently, casting shadows that danced like spirits around us, and I felt the air crackle with anticipation, the world pregnant with possibility. The boy's eyes fluttered, and I could feel a collective breath held, the tension palpable, a taut string pulled to its limits. I remember the way the moon watched, a silent witness to the struggle between light and dark, an eternal reminder of the cycle of life and death, echoing through the ages. The healer in all her forms, a testament to resilience, an embodiment of the very essence of womanhood, powerful, tender, haunted, and haunting. And as the boy's breath came steadier, I knew this was only the beginning. The darkness would always linger, a spectre haunting the corners of existence, but so too would the light, flickering, resilient, defying the void. I could feel it, the connection between these women, the pulse of healing that ran deep through the earth, a promise that they would not stand alone against the encroaching shadows. Their hearts beat in unison, a rhythm of strength, a song woven into the very fabric of the universe, echoing the ancient wisdom of women who had come before, whispering secrets of survival in a world that often sought to extinguish their light. And as we stood there, on the precipice of despair and hope, I knew that the story was far from over. It would twist and turn, as unpredictable as the wind, but as long as there were women like Ilara and Mara, the dance of healing would continue, fierce and unyielding, a testament to the power of love, resilience, and the indomitable spirit of women as healers. The air crackled with tension, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes your heart pound a frantic tattoo against your ribcage. A distant explosion echoed, shaking the ground beneath my feet, and for a split second, the world around me held its breath. I was standing in the remnants of what used to be a home, the shadows of lives once lived haunted the space. A child's teddy bear lay forgotten, its once bright colors dulled by layers of dust and soot. I could almost hear the laughter that had once filled these walls, now replaced by a deafening silence that screamed of loss. Nadia crouched beside me, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the decaying remnants of a family's life. I remember, she whispered, her voice a fragile thread weaving through the chaos. I remember the smell of fresh bread baking, the warmth of my mother's embrace, her eyes glimmered with unshed tears, memories flickering like ghosts in the dark corners of her mind. She was a warrior, yet here she was, stripped bare, vulnerable amidst the ruins, her heart waging war against the shadows that threatened to engulf her. Across the rubble, Lena stood, her jaw clenched, a fierce resolve etched across her face. She was a soldier, trained to fight, yet the battlefield of her spirit raged within. "We can't just sit here, Nadia," she snapped, her voice sharp as broken glass. "We have to fight. We have to be their voice." Lena's need to protect was palpable, a palpable force that made the air shimmer with intensity. But beneath her bravado lay a torrent of fear, a knot of guilt that twisted in her stomach. She had witnessed horrors that no human should ever endure, the faces of friends lost, the screams of innocence, the weight of it all pressed down like a leaden cloak. "Fight!" Nadia's laughter was a brittle sound, echoing through the desolation. "What are we fighting for? There's nothing left to protect." She looked up, her eyes searching the horizon, longing for a flicker of hope, a sign that this nightmare would end. All around us, the air trembled with the remnants of conflict, a world torn apart by war, where women were left to pick up the pieces while the men wielded weapons of destruction. I remember the sound of sirens wailing, the frantic rush of people fleeing, the way the world felt like it was imploding. I watched as Lena and Nadia clung to one another, two souls adrift in a sea of despair. "You can't let it take you," Lena urged, her voice softening, the anger dissipating like fog under the morning sun. "We'll find a way. Together." The promise hung in the air, fragile yet powerful, a lifeline thrown into the abyss. But then, the world shifted. A figure emerged from the shadows, a silhouette against the backdrop of chaos. It was an enemy, a specter of war, a reminder that danger lurked around every corner. My heart raced as I felt the weight of Lena's hand on my arm, her grip fierce and unyielding. "Stay behind me," she murmured, the protective instinct flaring in her gaze. There was something haunting in that moment, a juxtaposition of fear and defiance, a reminder that even in the darkest hours, the human spirit burns bright. Time stretched, each second an eternity, the weight of every heartbeat echoing in the silence. The tension thickened as the figure stepped closer, the shadows obscuring their intentions. I could see Lena's breath quicken, the way her body coiled like a spring, ready to unleash fury or flight. And I felt it, the overwhelming urge to scream, to leap into the fray beside her, to fight against the tide of hopelessness. But in that frozen moment, I also felt the weight of resignation, the haunting realization that war is not just fought with weapons, but with heartbreak and sacrifice. It is women like Nadia and Lena who become the unsung heroes, navigating a landscape littered with grief and loss, their battles fought in silence and shadows. I remember, I found myself whispering, as if invoking some forgotten strength. I remember the strength of my mother, the fire in her eyes when she told me stories of survival. Nadia turned to me then, her expression shifting as if she could see the echoes of my memories, flickering images of laughter, warmth, and love. "We are more than this," she declared, a fierce determination igniting within her. "We are the stories of our people, the voices that will not be silenced." And suddenly, the air shifted again, charged with a different kind of energy, the promise of resilience woven into the fabric of our sorrow. I could hear the heartbeat of the city around us, a rhythmic pulse that thrummed with life, even in the face of destruction. But still, the figure loomed, and dread settled over us like a heavy fog. In that moment, I understood the weight of choice, the burden of standing at the precipice of conflict. Would we retreat into the shadows, allowing fear to dictate our fate? Or would we step forward, our voices rising like a chorus against the silence? Time slipped through our fingers like sand, and as the figure advanced, I felt the surge of hope mingling with fear. Lena's resolve was palpable, and Nadia's spirit shimmered with the echoes of countless women before us, a lineage of strength carved from the pain of war. Together, I breathed, and the word hung in the air, a lifeline binding us against the chaos. In that moment, everything shifted again, a fleeting glimpse of possibility amidst the despair. I could see the stars flickering above, a universe of hope stretching beyond the confines of our broken world. Time, memory, and the cosmos collided, a reminder that we are not merely victims of war, but warriors in our own right, holding the power of stories, of voices, echoing through the darkest nights. And as the figure drew closer, the weight of history pressed upon us, the stories of countless women who had come before, whose strength had paved the way for our own. We were not alone, we were part of something larger, a tapestry of resilience that would not be frayed. In that charged moment, every heartbeat became a declaration, every breath an act of defiance against the shadows threatening to consume us. The darkness loomed, and yet, within us flickered a light, the unyielding truth that even in the deepest despair, hope endures. The impact of war may scar, but it also births strength, forging bonds that defy the very fabric of conflict. As the figure stepped into the light, the world held its breath, and the confrontation began, not just against an enemy, but against the very essence of fear, longing, and the fierce desire to reclaim our stories, to rise from the ashes and become the narrators of our destinies. The pulse of the city quickened, and the legacy of women unraveling the threads of their own narratives became an unstoppable force, a testament to the strength that blooms even in the darkest corners of war. The clock struck midnight, its echo reverberating through the empty corridors of a crumbling tenement. Shadows danced in the corners, whispering secrets of despair, of dreams drowned in the chilling silence of forgotten hopes. I stood there, frozen, feeling the weight of history pressing down, a suffocating blanket of expectation and limitation. The air was thick with a stench of desperation, mingled with the lingering scent of burnt dreams. And in that moment, I could hear her voice, a haunting melody born of centuries of struggle, a cry that thrummed beneath my skin. Lila, a firebrand with a heart of steel and a spirit that flickered like a candle in the wind, paced the room. Her hands trembled, a silent symphony of anxiety and determination. I caught a glimpse of her eyes, dark pools reflecting 1,000 unspoken words, secrets held tight within the confines of her chest. "What if they don't let me speak?" she whispered, the words scraping against her throat like broken glass. Her fear was palpable, an electric charge in the air. Each breath she took crackled with tension, the unshed tears glistening like diamonds in her eyes. Across the room, Samir watched, a ghost of her former self, threads of her identity fraying at the edges. She wore the shadows of her past like a shroud, draped in the weight of 1,000 no's. "You know they'll silence you," she murmured, her voice barely escaping her lips. The resignation in her tone cut deeper than any blade. Her spirit, once vibrant, had been dulled by the drudgery of a life lived beneath the heavy hand of societal shackles. She remembered the whispers of her girlhood, dreams of becoming a lawyer swirling like smoke, ephemeral and insubstantial. "It's safer to stay quiet," she added, the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of her mouth, as if humor could mask the bitterness festering beneath. But Lila wouldn't have it. She clenched her fists, determination sparking in her chest like a fire igniting dry wood. "I refuse to live in silence. We deserve to be heard." Her words sliced through the darkness, a beacon of defiance radiating warmth into the icy corners of despair. Yet, as she spoke, I felt the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders, an invisible chain binding her to the expectations of a society that demanded obedience, a society that still viewed women as mere shadows, living echoes of what men deemed acceptable. The clock ticked on, cruel and relentless, as Lila's voice grew louder, each syllable a war cry against the oppressive silence that sought to consume her. "I remember when I thought I could change the world," she said, her voice trembling with the weight of memories. "I remember the day I first stepped into a courtroom, the way my heart raced, the hope blooming within me. But hope was as fragile as glass, shattering under the weight of reality." Samir's gaze drifted to the window, where the moon hung like a ghostly sentinel. "And what did that hope ever get us?" "A little bit of light before the darkness swallows us whole." The bitterness in her words was a familiar ache, a reminder of the countless times she'd been brushed aside, her ambitions crushed beneath the boot of archaic laws that dictated the bounds of her existence. "I remember when they told me that my place was in the home, not in the court. They said, let the men handle the heavy lifting." Yet Lila's fire blazed brighter still, fueled by the knowledge that beneath the weight of centuries of oppression, change was possible. "What if we could rewrite the rules?" she implored, her eyes shining with a fierce light, a glimmer of hope in the desolate landscape of their lives. "What if I could stand up there and demand justice for every woman silenced by the chains of fear?" Her determination was infectious, igniting a flicker of something long thought extinguished within Samir. The tension in the room thickened, a palpable force swirling around them. I felt the heartbeat of 1,000 women echoing in that space, a rhythm of resilience, a symphony of shared pain and ambition. I remembered the headlines, the stories of women rising against the tide, refusing to back down against the suffocating weight of societal limitations. The tremor of their struggle reverberated through history, their voices rising like a chorus against the darkness. "Do you believe it will change?" Samir asked, her voice a fragile thread, woven with doubt. "What if they laugh at you? What if they throw you out?" The shadows closed in, each question a dagger aimed at Lila's heart. But Lila's smile was steady, unwavering. "Let them laugh. Let them try." With each word, she pulled Samir back from the edge of despair, her conviction a lifeline in the swirling chaos. I remember the stories of women who fought before us, those who battled laws that sought to bind them. Their voices rise like constellations in the dark sky, guiding us to find our own light. As the night deepened, it felt as if the walls themselves could breathe, absorbing their hopes and fears, mingling with the chilling air. The weight of the moment pressed down, an unbearable tension that threatened to fracture the fragile resolve between them. "I can't go back," Samira finally whispered, her vulnerability raw, a wound laid bare. "I can't live in a world where I'm nothing but a shadow." In that moment, her heart spilled open like a broken dam, years of silence and pain flooding out. And in the depths of that shared darkness, a spark ignited. Lila stepped closer, reached out a trembling hand, and clasped Samira's tightly, their fingers interlocking, a lighthouse in the storm. "Then let's carve our own path, paint our own story in the annals of time." The clock continued ticking, relentless, relentless, a reminder that time waits for no one. And as the moon cast its silver light, illuminating the fears and the hopes that clashed in that tiny room, I felt the air shift. They stood on the precipice of something monumental, the burst of a dam waiting to spill forth, a wave of change gathering strength for the inevitable crash. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the echoes of the past, the cries of those who had come before them, their voices mingling, forming a haunting symphony that urged the two women forward. The shadows may have whispered of despair, but in that moment, they felt the pulse of possibility, and the night around them trembled with the promise of rebellion. The moon hung like a silver coin in the night sky, casting elongated shadows against the cold stone walls of the castle. A muffled cry echoed through the narrow corridors, penetrating the oppressive silence, a haunting reminder that the stakes were high. I remember standing there, breathless, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest, caught between the past and the uncertain future, a future that felt as if it had already slipped through my fingers. Eleanor, her auburn hair a wild halo around her face, stood in the flickering candlelight, eyes blazing with a fury that seemed to burn the air around her. She was a daughter of kings, yet trapped in the gilded cage of expectations, every breath weighed down by the chains of silence that bound her. "I will not be voiceless," she screamed, a challenge that reverberated off the ancient stones. Each word sliced through the heavy air, sharp and defiant. Her spirit was a tempest, raging against the confines of a world that sought to silence her. And then there was Beatrice, slumped against the wall, the cool stone biting into her back. Her dark curls fell into her eyes as she watched Eleanor with a mixture of envy and fear. She had a heart that yearned to sing, but the fear of rejection had left her voice a whisper, buried beneath layers of doubt. "What if they hear you? What if they come for you?" The question hung like a noose, tightening with every beat of her heart. "You'll bring them down upon us," she warned, but Eleanor's fury burned brighter, an inferno against the cold chill of conformity. I remember the way the shadows danced on the walls, flickering with the rhythm of their conflict. Outside, the night was a tapestry of stars, a cruel contrast to the darkness that formed in the corners of their hearts, the unyielding fear of a life unlived. The walls of tradition pressed in closer, threatening to suffocate the very essence of who they were. Every glance exchanged, every word spoken, was a silent battle, an echo of the countless women before them who had found their voices snuffed out, like candles extinguished in the wind. Eleanor's voice rose again, fierce and unyielding. "I will write our stories. I will etch our names into the annals of history." The thought of it sent a shiver down my spine, her ambition igniting a light that threatened to consume them both. The very idea of a woman's voice woven into the fabric of history felt as radical as plunging into icy waters in midwinter. Heartbeats quickened, and the air grew thick with possibility, electric and charged. Yet, for Beatrice, it was a risk too great, a leap too far. And if your pen is met with fire? What then? Her words dripped with a despair that clung to the room like smoke. Time twisted, and I could feel the pulse of their fear, vibrating through the stone like a battle cry. Eleanor's defiance, a wildflower pushing through the cracks of concrete, contrasted sharply with Beatrice's retreat, a fragile petal blown away by the wind. They bathe once a year, Beatrice. So yeah, romance was earthy. The absurdity of it, the laughter bubbling up amidst the tension, felt like a release. But the laughter was short-lived, a mirage in a desert of despair. Listen, Eleanor's voice softened, an ember glowing in the dark. You want to write too. I see it in your eyes, even when you deny it. And in that moment, I remembered the times I had stood at the edge of my own dreams, paralyzed by the weight of expectations. I remembered the nights spent staring at blank pages, haunted by the fear of inadequacy, paralyzed by the thought of what others might say. Was it easier to fade away, to let the shadows consume me, than to risk the pain of being seen? The tension shifted, a palpable force crackling in the air. It was the moment before a storm, charged and electric, where everything felt possible yet frighteningly precarious. And then the door burst open, the guards spilling into the room like a flood, their armor clanking ominously against the stone floor. The moment shattered, the dream of freedom crashing down around them like broken glass. I remember the look on Eleanor's face, a mix of defiance and terror that settled into a mask of bravery. You cannot silence us, she shouted, hands raised defiantly, a warrior ready to face the onslaught. But as the guards closed in, I felt the weight of history bearing down, the countless women who had come before them, their voices swallowed by the void of time. Would Eleanor's fire be snuffed out, a flicker lost in darkness? And what of Beatrice's whispered dreams? The shadows whispered secrets of despair and hope, their intertwining roots sinking deep into the soil of grief, longing, and unfulfilled desire. I remember the air thick with anticipation, the breath held tight in chests like secrets waiting to burst free. And then, the silence broke, not with a scream, but a quiet resolve, a promise that refused to die. In the face of fear, they would rise. In the face of oppression, they would find their voices. It was not just a moment, it was the beginning of a movement, a heartbeat echoing through the halls of history. As the guards moved in, fists clenched and weapons drawn, Eleanor turned to Beatrice, her voice a whisper now, softer yet more powerful than ever. Together, we are unstoppable. The promise hung in the air like a ghost, a reminder of resilience against the crushing weight of silence. They stood there, two women against the world, and I felt the breath of centuries behind them, urging them forward. The fight was beginning, and they were ready, unwilling to let their stories fade into the shadows. And just like that, the intensity of the moment swelled, weaving their destinies together, strung with threads of hope and despair. The past, present, and future collided, echoing through the ages, an unbreakable chain of voices reclaiming the narrative. The world outside remained oblivious, lost in its own chaos, but within those stone walls, a revolution was igniting. This was not just a clash of wills, it was a reawakening, a reminder that the voices of women would not be silenced, that every heartbeat carried a story worth telling. And as I stood there, heart racing, I knew this was merely the beginning, the first chapter of a much larger tale woven through the fabric of time, threading through the shadows, illuminating the darkness with raw, unyielding light. The hammer strikes the anvil, a shuddering echo reverberating through the dimly lit workshop, each clang a heartbeat, a pulse, a desperate plea. Meris stands there, drenched in sweat, her fingers blackened with soot, face illuminated by the flickering light of a single candle. It dances, shadows leaping across the stone walls like ghosts of women past, women who fought, who bled, who shaped metal and destiny with equal ferocity. The air thickens, a storm brewing in her chest, as she hears the footsteps approaching. Meris, stop! Elder's voice slices through the tension, sharp as the blade Meris is forging. It is a voice weighed down by urgency yet laced with tenderness. Elder, with hair like spun gold, stands framed in the doorway, eyes wide, reflecting panic and defiance. You can't keep risking this for a guild that won't have us. You know that. Merys glances at the half-finished dagger, her heart pounding in rhythm with the hammer. They will have us. They must. She can almost taste the promise of inclusion, the heady scent of acceptance. She remembers the night spent poring over tomes, the whispered dreams shared under the cloak of darkness. She remembers how the world shunned women like them, how it insisted they remain silent, submissive, mere shadows in the grand tapestry of trade. Yet here they are, two ghosts in a graveyard of dreams, standing between the weight of tradition and the fragile thread of hope. We're not just shadows, Elder. We can carve our names into this, she insists, voice trembling with passion. We have skills. We hear a crash from the street outside, a shout, a scream. The world spills into the workshop like a tide, carrying with it the lifeblood of fear. Merys' heart drops. They don't have time. Not now. Not when every day is a battle for their right to exist as artisans, as women who dare to dream. Please, Elder pleads, eyes glistening, we can run. We can find another way. No one is going to take us seriously if we're caught here. But the spark in Merys burns brighter than the fear. And what? Live as ghosts forever? No. The guild needs us. There's a meeting tonight. If we're there, if we show them what we can do, what we can do. Elder echoes bitterly. You mean what you can do? They'll never see me. And now the raw truth sharpens the air like the blade Merys is forging. Elder's hands are delicate, scarred but unsteady, a testament to the years spent in a world that insists softness is weakness. Merys knows this, sees the way Elder's soul flinches at the clang of metal, how her laughter often hides a tremor. Stop doubting yourself. The words burst forth, raw and desperate. You are more than the sum of your fears, Elder. You've glided through every challenge, you've crafted beauty from nothing, another cry from outside, the sound of men, angry men. Merys steels herself, feeling the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. Women have been silenced for centuries, yet here they are, at the precipice of rebellion. Do you hear that? She whispers, urgency threading her voice. They're fighting for something. We can fight too. For our place, for our craft. We are not alone. Elder's gaze darkens, shadowed by doubt. What if they don't want us? What if we're just, then we make them want us? The words explode, igniting a fire in the dim room. We've toiled too long in the shadows, Elder. They will see us, even if we have to carve our names into the very stone they tread upon. Suddenly, a thought strikes her like lightning, and she retreats into a memory, holding it like a talisman. I remember when my mother taught me the way of the forge. She said, every hammer strike echoes through time, Merys. Make sure it's your voice the world hears. Elder steps closer, the raw edge of defiance softening her features. She remembers too, the shared laughter over stubborn metal, the warmth of resilience woven through their shared stories. Your mother was a fool, she says softly, yet a smile creeps in, almost reluctant. But a good one. Yes. Merys laughs, the sound spilling from her like a river breaking free. It swirls with hope, wraps around Elder's heart, coaxing it awake. And fools forge destiny. Outside, chaos spirals. The clash of bodies resonates through the air, a violent reminder that the world is not kind to those who dare to stand. But the air in the workshop thickens, infused with a fragile courage. Together, they are not simply women, they are artisans, warriors, creators in a world that would rather see them silent. And as they look at each other, the unspoken pact forms. The night's shadows deepen around them, cloaking their resolve. Tonight, we will go, Merys declares, breathless and alive. Tonight, we will make them listen. We will refuse to fade into the background. Elder nods, chin lifted with newfound strength, a spark in her eyes that mirrors the flickering flame. Together. Always. The hammer strikes again, the anvil ringing, the sound breaking the silence like a battle cry, a promise. They are on the edge, hearts thrumming with the promise of rebellion, the intoxicating allure of the unknown. And as the footsteps grow louder outside, they know they are no longer just fighting for a place in the guild, they are fighting for their very souls. The night stretches before them, a canvas mingled with dreams and fears, secrets and shadows. And in that fragile moment, with the echoes of the past singing in their blood, they step forward into the darkness, ready to carve their names into history. No longer mere artisans, but women who will not be forgotten. The world may fear them, but they will rise, and in their rise, they will bring thunder. The echoes of their hearts will resonate, a melody of defiance that stirs the very cosmos. And as they prepare to face the storm, they know, they do not walk alone. The night is alive, alive with the cries of 1,000 hopes, and in the distance, the guild waits, unaware of the tempest about to break. The moon hung low, a silver coin lost in a sea of darkness, as the castle walls resonated with the fevered whispers of anxious hearts. I saw her there, the queen, standing at the edge of despair, her fingers trembling against the cold stone. "What do you want from me?" she hissed into the silence, a feral defiance cracking through the velvet of her royal facade. It was a question tossed into the void, echoing back with no answer, just the relentless ticking of time, counting down to her reckoning. I remember the first time I saw Eleanor, the soft glow of her determination illuminating the shadows of the court. She was unlike any other, an anomaly wrapped in silk and gold, but with a spirit caught between worlds. In her eyes, I saw the embers of rebellion, a woman forged in a world that sought to bind her. She was a queen, yes, but she was also a woman, and those two roles clashed like swords in the night. Every breath she took was a battle, every heartbeat a reminder of the chains that sought to pull her into submission. And then there was Margot, sharp and shrewd, her laughter ringing out like a chime amidst the tension, a stark contrast to the weight of her crown. She wore her cynicism like armor, a shield against the world's cruelty. "You think they fear you because of your blood," she had said once, her voice laced with bitter amusement. "They fear us because we refuse to bend." Underneath the biting humor danced a wound, deep and raw. Margot had once been a cherished daughter, but now she was a pawn in a game where the stakes were too high, and the players too ruthless. In that moment, as Eleanor confronted the looming shadow of treachery, I could feel the air crackle with a tempest of emotion. The whispers turned to shouts, accusations hurled like daggers, each one striking at the fragile heart of her reign. "A woman cannot rule," they cried. "She must be a puppet, strings pulled by stronger hands." I felt the weight of their scorn. It pressed upon my chest like a vice, and I was left gasping for breath. How could they not see the fire that burned within her? But Eleanor stood firm, her resolve an indomitable force. "I am no puppet," she declared, her voice rising above the clamor, raw and unyielding. The ground beneath her seemed to tremble, and for a fleeting moment, I thought she might be the storm that would shatter their expectations. I remember the way her gaze pierced through the fog of doubt, igniting hope among the souls who dared to believe in her. Her vulnerability was a shield, her pain a weapon. A flash of memory struck me then, Margot, her laughter echoing down the empty hallways, a ghost of a happier past. "Life is absurd," she had once mused, rolling her eyes at the grandiosity of it all. "We bathe once a year, romance is earthy, darling." But beneath the jest lay the truth, a truth that dug deeper than skin. Her face, once radiant with dreams, now reflected the burden of survival etched upon her brow. She longed to break free, yet the chains of duty held her close, a cruel irony that danced in the shadows of her heart. As the accusations grew louder, I felt the storm gather, a gathering of emotion swirling like leaves in a tempest. The room thickened with tension, each heartbeat a drum, each breath a fight. I could see it in her eyes, the flicker of fear and defiance, a battle raging within her soul. "You think you can break me?" Eleanor's words cut through the air, sharp and unwavering. The silence that followed was deafening, a space filled with the weight of possibility, of impending doom. Margot's laughter pierced the tension, a sudden burst of chaotic joy. "Oh, darling, they may try, but they will never succeed. We are not mere women, we are storms waiting to be unleashed." I felt the warmth of her spirit wash over me, a flame igniting amidst the shadows. But even as the words left her lips, I sensed the undertow of despair lurking beneath her bravado. The world around them was a chessboard, and they were but queens, moving in dangerous, calculated steps. Suddenly, Eleanor's voice trembled through the silence. "What shall I do?" she whimpered, and in that moment, I felt the weight of 1,000 lifetimes rest upon her shoulders. The question hung in the air, a dark cloud threatening to swallow me whole, to drown us all in despair. The weight of history pressed upon her, and I could see the flickering candle of hope wavering in the wind of uncertainty. I remember a time when strength was woven into the very fabric of their beings, when laughter poured forth like a river, a balm for their souls. But now, as they faced the abyss, I felt the fragile threads of their resolve snapping, one by one. The clock ticked on, its hands relentless, mocking them with every passing second. Shadows danced across the stone walls, a reminder of the ghosts that would haunt them if they faltered. Eleanor's gaze flickered to the window, the moon's reflection casting an ethereal glow, an omen, perhaps, or a promise. "I will not falter," she whispered, and the words hung in the air like a spell. But doubt gnawed at her insides, a ravenous beast stalking its prey. I could feel it clawing at the edges of her heart, as Margot stepped closer, her presence a tether to reality. "We must not waver, we are the storm. They should fear us." The confrontation loomed like a spectre, ominous and unyielding. The air was thick with unspoken words, each glance loaded with the weight of fear and determination. They were warriors in a battlefield of their own making, fighting not just for their thrones but for their very souls. And as I stood, a witness to this maelstrom of emotion, I felt the earth tremble beneath me, the very fabric of history quaking with the profound weight of their destinies. Each heartbeat echoed the uncertainty of what lay ahead, the promise of love and loss entwined in a dance as old as time itself. The past whispered through the corridors, shadows of women before them who had fought and bled for a chance to be seen, to be heard. In that moment of crisis, I understood that their struggle was not just a tale of crowns and kingdoms, it was a manifestation of an eternal battle, a fight for the right to command the storm, to unleash the tempest that lay dormant within. The moon bore witness, casting its pallid light on these two fierce souls caught in a web of duty and desire, a battle of wills that would reverberate through time. As the scene unfolded, I was pulled deeper into the churning waters of their conflict, the intensity rising like the tide, a wave of emotion crashing against the shores of history. The moment hung suspended, heavy with the weight of possibility, an unending cycle of struggle and triumph. And as I held my breath, caught in the throes of their story, I knew with every fiber of my being that this was only the beginning, a mere whisper of the storm that would soon engulf them, and me along with them. The classroom was a cage of whispers, each sound a feather falling in the depths of a storm. The air was thick with the scent of desperation, thick enough to choke on, as Amina stood at the front, her heart pounding like war drums in her chest. Shadows danced across the walls, flickering like memories she wanted to forget. Outside, the sun hung low, a fiery orb trembling on the horizon, casting long, ghostly fingers into the room where dreams went to die. "I remember," she muttered, her voice a thread, barely holding the weight of her thoughts. "I remember the first time I picked up a book, the words stumbled out, each syllable a plea for validation, for understanding. But the faces in front of her were frozen, locked in a haze of apathy and fear. They were women, yes, but they were shackled, bound by the invisible chains of a society that deemed their minds worthless. Behind her, Fatima sat with her child wrapped tightly in her arms, eyes wide and glistening like dark stars caught in the gravity of a black hole. Fatima's hands trembled as she traced the lines of her baby's cheek, a gesture steeped in both love and despair. "What good is knowledge if it cannot feed him?" she whispered, her voice breaking like glass underfoot. "He will need to survive in this world of men who wield power like weapons, not words." Amina's heart twisted. She didn't want to feel her own powerlessness reflected back at her, but there it was, raw and unbearable. She fought against the urge to scream, to shatter the silence that wrapped around them like a suffocating shroud. Silence was the enemy, and yet, it clung to them, unwilling to release its grip. She started, but the words caught in her throat, jagged and sharp. How could she explain that education was not just a privilege but a lifeline? That each scratch of a pen on paper could ignite a revolution? The walls around her seemed to close in, the weight of expectation pressing down until she felt as though she might implode. And then there was Mariam, her spirit like a candle flickering against the dark. What if we do not want to fight? She asked, her voice a fragile whisper. What if all we want is to learn? To read stories that take us far away from here? Her eye sparkled with a hint of rebellion, but the chains of doubt were heavy. Amina could see the longing etched in her features, a deep, aching desire to escape a life defined by limitations. Then we fight in our own way, Amina said, her heart igniting with a fierce urgency. We fight with our words, with our stories. We read, we write, we teach each other. The intensity of her words hung in the air like smoke from an unresolved fire, spreading slowly, seeping into the corners of their fears. But the shadows outside were creeping closer. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway, a cold reminder that freedom was a dangerous game. You shouldn't be here, came a voice, low and menacing, slicing through their fragile bubble like a knife. A figure loomed at the door, the silhouette of a man filled with authority and contempt. Women don't belong in classrooms. Amina froze, the breath hitching in her throat, a million thoughts colliding in her mind. The fear was tangible, a monster gnawing at her resolve. But behind her, Fatima squeezed her son tighter, her defiance rising like a phoenix from the ashes of her resignation. You will not silence us, Fatima said, a fire igniting in her gaze. Our voices matter. Our children matter. The strength of her conviction was an electric jolt, and Amina felt the weight of the moment shift, tremble. The man stepped forward, his presence a storm cloud darkening the light. You will regret this, he warned, the threat hanging in the air like a guillotine waiting to drop. But might was not the only power in this room, love was a force too, and Amina felt it surge, a wave crashing against the rocky shores of oppression. Every word we speak is a rebellion, Amina declared, her voice rising, catching the rhythm of her heartbeat. She turned to the women, their faces reflecting a kaleidoscope of fear and strength. Knowledge is our birthright. It can't be taken from us. Not today. Mariam's eyes glistened, and she nodded, as if she had found the key to a door long locked. Remember the stories, Amina. Remember the dreams we share. Her words wrapped around Amina like a warm embrace, a reminder that they were not alone in this battle. And outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a crimson hue over the world as night fell, the city around them alive with shadows that whispered of forgotten histories and untold futures. Amina felt the weight of countless women pressing against her, their spirits entwined with hers, each breath a reminder of resilience. As the confrontation loomed, Amina reached out, clutching Fatima's hand, uniting their trembling fingers. Hope flowed through them, a current connecting their hearts. They were warriors in their own right, armed with words, determined to forge a path in the darkness. The clock ticked louder now, each second echoing like the beat of a war drum. And as the figure at the door inched closer, threatening their sanctuary, Amina's spirit soared. This was their moment, and she would let no one extinguish the light they had ignited together. In that room thick with tension and dreams, the battle for education and literacy began, not just a fight for knowledge but for freedom, dignity, and the right to exist without chains. They would not stand down. They would rise. The clock struck midnight, its chime reverberating through the dimly lit hall like the tolling of a funeral bell. In the shadows, Ilara stood frozen, her heart a caged bird beating furiously against the bars of her reality. She clutched a tattered lace handkerchief, her mother's last gift, its edges rough against her skin, grounding her in the swirl of emotions threatening to engulf her. Tonight was not just about her, tonight was about a transaction, a negotiation drenched in centuries of tradition, a dowry that would seal her fate in the blood of the past. Across the room, Alaric paced, the flickering candlelight casting restless shadows on his handsome face. He was her childhood friend turned reluctant suitor, the weight of his own family's expectations pulling him into a tempest of obligation. I can't, he muttered, his voice a raw whisper, heavy with unspoken words, as if he were pleading with the universe itself. We can't. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between duty and desire, the haunting echoes of their shared laughter now morphing into chains that threatened to bind them. She remembered the sun-soaked afternoons they spent weaving dreams together, their laughter dancing through the air like whispered secrets. But those dreams felt like grains of sand slipping through their fingers now, lost to the tides of their family's ambitions. I remember when we promised each other, she said, her voice trembling like a fragile leaf caught in a storm. We said we would choose for ourselves. The bitterness of her own words sliced through the air, leaving a chill that settled between them like a ghost, haunting and unyielding. Alaric paused, his back to her, the weight of his indecision tangible in the air. Ilara, you know it's not that simple. His voice cracked, and she knew he was teetering on the edge of something profound. The fear of losing her was eclipsed by the reality of what lay ahead, a marriage not born of love, but of economic necessity. A dowry, a price, a transaction to be sealed under the watchful eyes of their families, like a deal struck over the carcass of a long-forgotten dream. The room pulsed with tension, each heartbeat a reminder of their impending entrapment. The clock ticked louder now, a relentless reminder of time slipping away, each tick a silent witness to their paralysis. Ilara stepped closer, her voice a fierce whisper. You think I want this? You think I want to be another pawn in this cruel game? Her hands trembled at her sides, not from fear but from the intensity of her resolve. Suddenly, a shout rang out from beyond the door, a drunken jester's laughter echoing through the halls, celebrating, reveling in the misery of a love lost to greed. The sound shattered the night, a grotesque reminder of the world outside their fragile cocoon. Worry flickered in his eyes as Alaric turned back to her, his expression caught between longing and despair. Then what else can we do? He asked, the vulnerability in his voice raw and exposed, like a wound laid bare. You know my father's demands, and your family, my family. Ilara spat, the taste of bile rising in her throat. They see me as a ledger entry, a means to an end. Do you think they care for my happiness? It's all about the dowry, the gold, the status. It's a transaction, Alaric. A bargain that places my worth in coins and cattle. Her voice broke, the weight of her frustration spilling over like a river bursting its banks. Silence hung heavy in the air, thick with the remnants of unspoken dreams and crushed hopes. Alaric swallowed hard, his expression a mask of conflicted emotions. But what if we can't escape it? He whispered, the finality of his question hanging like a guillotine above their heads. What if this is all we have? In that moment, the shadows seemed to close in around them, the walls of the room morphing into a prison, encasing their desperate hearts. Ilara's chest tightened, and she could almost hear the echo of their laughter fading into the ether, leaving behind only the bitter taste of despair. I refuse to be a prize to be won, Alaric, she declared, her voice rising with a fierce intensity. I will not live my life shackled by the chains of a dowry. Then what? He challenged, his voice rising to match hers, desperation spilling forth as he stepped closer, their breaths mingling in the charged air. What is love without the means to sustain it? Without the backing of our families, our futures are as fragile as the dreams we once held. Tears burned in Ilara's eyes, a tempest of anger and sorrow swirling within her. Then let me be free, even if it means I walk alone, she cried, the words tearing from her soul like a wounded animal seeking release. Let me choose my own path, even if it leads me to the abyss. I would rather face the darkness alone than drown in the suffocating light of false promises. And in that moment, as their eyes locked, the world around them faded into nothingness. They stood on the precipice of eternity, two souls entwined in a battle far greater than the sum of their flesh. The weight of expectation hung heavy like a shroud, but within that darkness, a flicker of rebellion ignited. The silence was deafening, a breath held between the hearts of two people yearning for a love that transcended the confines of their shattered dreams. A decision loomed, pregnant with possibility and despair, the choices of their lives teetering on the edge of a knife. The clock's relentless ticking echoed in their minds, reminding them that time, like their dreams, was slipping away. And then, in the crackling stillness, Ilara whispered, I want to believe. I want to believe there's more than this. Alaric's eyes glimmered with a mixture of fear and hope, a fragile flicker in the overwhelming darkness. Then let's find it together, he murmured, the bond of their hearts tightening, a promise whispered into the void. In that moment, a pact was forged, not of gold or cattle, but of unyielding will. As the night deepened around them, the boundaries of their reality blurred, and they stood hand in hand, ready to confront the storm that awaited them, a tempest born of choice, love, and the haunting specter of a dowry that threatened to consume them whole. The clock strikes midnight, and the city is a ghost of its daytime self, wrapped in shadows, shivering in silence. A single streetlight flickers, illuminating the fractured pavement, and there she stands, Clara, her breath vaporizing into the frigid air. Hair unkempt, mascara streaked down her face like the aftermath of a haunting. She's waiting, but the night is a cruel mistress, and she is lost in its depths. I remember the mirrors, she whispers to herself, teeth chattering, voice barely a whisper, like a lost prayer. Images flood her mind, sisters' laughter ringing in her ears, the way their mother would stand by the bathroom door with a gentle smile, and yet, that smile felt like a weight, like a demand wrapped in silk. You must be beautiful, it echoed, to be worthy. Each word draped over her like a shroud. Across the street, Jenna watches, pressed against the cold brick of a cafe, her heart thudding in sync with Clara's unsteady breaths. She's a canvas painted in insecurities, layers of foundation and lipstick masking the cracks. I remember when I thought beauty was power. Her voice quivers, saturated with a sorrow that has become her second skin. She recalls the gazes of men, the approval that felt like a drug coursing through her veins, the applause of society, the currency of validation. But now? The applause has turned into a haunting silence, and every compliment feels like a haunting ghost that whispers of inadequacy. These two women, forever tethered to each other by the invisible strings of expectation, are locked in a standoff against the ideals that suffocate them. The stars blink above, indifferent witnesses to their suffering. Clara's heart races, a drumbeat of defiance echoing against the beauty standards that have shackled them both. She steps forward, her silhouette a trembling question mark against the void. Why, she shouts into the night, a raw sound, an outburst that rattles the glass in nearby windows. Why do we let them dictate who we are? The words hang in the air, heavy and electric, crackling with the truth that burns through the facade. She wants to claw at the skin of these ideals, tear them apart and expose the jagged edges underneath, but the fear of what lies beneath her own layers paralyzes her. Jenna knows this feeling well. She can taste the bitterness of self-loathing on her tongue as she watches Clara dissolve into despair. She presses a hand to her chest, feeling the weight of her own insecurities pressing heavily upon her, suffocating. I remember the day I decided to stop fighting, she murmurs, heart racing with the pulse of regret. When I curled into myself, swaddled in the belief that I would never be enough. Her fingers tremble as she touches the scar on her wrist, a reminder of the battles lost in the name of conformity. Clara's fists clench, nails biting into her palms, anchoring her to the anger that surges through her. You think they care, she screams, voice breaking, the pain palpable in the air. We are not trophies, Jenna. We are not objects to be molded into their fantasies. The words ricochet between them, shattering the illusion of a perfect night, exposing the fragile truth. Jenna steps forward, caught in the storm of Clara's rage, and feels the urgency wrap around them both. But what if they never see us, she asks, the crystalline tears spilling over, glinting like stars against the pavement. What if we are forever shadows, never able to step into the light? The question lingers, a specter of doubt hanging between them. Clara's heart pounds, a tidal wave of emotion crashing against her, threatening to drown them both. Then we become our own light, she says fiercely, punctuating the darkness with her strength. The fight grows inside her, a phoenix igniting amidst the ashes. I'm tired of being afraid. The air thickens with anticipation, their breaths mingling as they face each other, two warriors on a battlefield that feels surreal and unyielding. The city looms around them, an entity with its own heartbeat, pulsing with the weight of unattainable ideals, the ghostly remnants of beauty standards that echo through the streets like a siren's call. Their battle is personal yet universal, a struggle encapsulated in every woman who has ever stood before a mirror, scrutinizing the reflection, staring back, judging, comparing. I remember the whispers, Clara breathes, eyes ablaze, the whispers that told me I was never enough. But I refuse to listen anymore. Her words are a spell, each syllable a defiance against the tides of expectation. Jenna feels it too, that intoxicating rush of rebellion weaving through her veins, and for the first time, she stands taller, no longer a reflection of someone else's vision, but a flame igniting her own. And just like that, the tension shifts, the air crackling with a renewed energy. The world spins around them, but in this moment, they are the center of their own universe, illuminating the darkness with strength and vulnerability. Together? Clara asks, the question hanging like a promise, fragile yet powerful. Together, Jenna confirms, voice thick with emotion. The weight of their shared struggles binds them, an unspoken pact forged in the heart of the night. As they stand, two figures against the backdrop of an indifferent world, the clock ticks on, each second a heartbeat echoing the desire for change. The city shifts, the shadows swirl, and they take a step forward, toward something undefined yet alluringly bright. And as they walk into the uncertainty, the weight of beauty standards and societal expectations trailing behind like a ghost, they smile, knowing that the fight for their own identities has just begun. The night envelops them, the stars aligning in a silent agreement, a promise of hope amidst the chaos. The moon hung low over the village, a cold, watchful eye. Shadows elongated like fingers grasping at secrets. I remember the whispers, the sharp, piercing sounds that sliced through the silence like daggers. Which, they hissed, and with that single word, a life was shattered. I stood there, paralyzed, heart pounding, as they dragged her through the dirt, the woman whose laughter had once danced in the air like music, now reduced to a grotesque spectacle of fear. Elena, my childhood friend, her face contorted not just with terror but with the weight of betrayal. I could see it in her eyes, the flicker of defiance rapidly extinguished, replaced with the chilling acceptance of her fate. "They'll never believe you," she'd said to me once, her voice trembling as she spoke of the townsfolk. How painfully true. I was powerless, a mere spectator in a tragic play, torn between loyalty and the suffocating grip of conformity. And then there was Agnes, the village healer, her hands once warm and capable, now bound with coarse rope. She had held my fevered brow as a child, her fingers infused with the wisdom of herbs and the comfort of touch. "They're scared of what they don't understand," she had whispered in a moment of vulnerability. "Fear breeds monsters." But here, in this frozen moment, it was the monsters who had come alive, fueled by ignorance and the hungry desire to scapegoat. "Why?" I whispered, though the question hung heavy in the air, unanswered, a ghost haunting the edges of my mind. "Why her? Why now?" The chains rattled against the stone, a grim symphony echoing through the night. The crowd surged, a tidal wave of fury and fear, as if the very ground beneath us trembled with the weight of their unaddressed demons. Elena's voice cut through the din, sharp and desperate. "You think you're safe? You think your sins will be washed away by my blood?" It was a statement that reverberated like a church bell tolling for the damned. The mob faltered, but only for a heartbeat. In the flickering torches, I saw faces contorted by rage and relief, the sick satisfaction of a scapegoat. And in that moment, something broke within me. I felt an ache, a raw, pulsing wound that threatened to consume me whole. I was caught in a tempest of emotions. Fear clenched at my throat, anger boiled just beneath the surface. The townsfolk, my neighbors, my friends, were wrapped in a shroud of hysteria, and I was suffocating within it. I wanted to scream, to claw my way through the crowd and pull Elena to safety, but my feet were frozen, shackled by unseen chains of complicity. A flash of memory surged forth, our laughter echoing in the sun-drenched fields, the scent of wildflowers intoxicating our young hearts. I murmured to myself, I remember the summer days when we thought we were invincible. But invincibility crumbled like stale bread beneath the relentless march of fear. The laughter faded, leaving only the bitter taste of ashes in my mouth. Agnes locked eyes with me, her gaze pleading. "You must stand for what is right. Speak." Her voice was a haunting melody amidst the chaos, yet the words seemed to catch in my throat like bile. I was complicit by silence, a witness to the execution of innocence. What can one voice do? I thought, panic tightening its grip. And yet, in that echoing despair, something ignited within me. The realization that I was not just an observer, I was part of this monstrous tableau. I remember the warmth of friendship. the thought flickered, a candle fighting against the wind. Silence is betrayal, Agnes shouted, her words cutting through me like a blade. And suddenly, I knew I had to choose. I could either remain a coward, or I could step into the fray, risking everything for the sake of justice. The village shuddered beneath the weight of their collective rage as I took a step forward, a shaky breath escaping my lips, heavy with the gravity of my choice. But the crowd surged like a wild beast, hungry for blood, for release from their own tormented souls. The torches flickered, shadows dancing eerily against the stones. The air crackled with tension, every heartbeat a countdown to an inevitable disaster. I saw their faces, hollow, terrified, yet twisted with a sense of righteousness. They were chasing a spectre, an enemy they had conjured from their own fears, and in the process, they were about to extinguish the very light of humanity. Stop! Please! I found my voice, a whisper rising against the roar, but it was overshadowed by the collective insanity. Elena is no witch. She is not your enemy. The words felt like stones in my mouth, each syllable a defiant act against the tide of hatred. The faces turned, eyes ablaze with anger, confusion, and a flicker of doubt. Silence the witch, they cried, drowning out reason, drowning out compassion. I trembled, the weight of their hatred pressing down upon me like a suffocating fog. I could see Agnes struggling, the ropes digging into her skin, her spirit unyielding even as the world closed in. If I could only take her place, I thought, an ache in my chest that threatened to shatter me. But what good would that do? Would it satiate their hunger? Would it calm the storm? I remember our laughter, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes, mingling with the dust of the ground. And in that moment, something primal and raw awakened. The realization that I was not just a bystander, that I could scream, that I could fight, that I could challenge the very fabric of this madness. I felt my heart hammering against my ribcage, a desperate plea for justice clawing its way to the surface. But it was not enough. The world spun violently around me, shadows morphing into monstrous shapes. Fear clawed at the edges of my mind, but I stood my ground. Elena! Agnes! I shouted, my voice a beacon against the encroaching darkness, yet only to be swallowed by the storm of chaos. The moon, an indifferent witness, cast an eerie glow over the unfolding nightmare. In the heart of that haunting night, I understood, this was not just about a witch hunt. This was a mirror reflecting the darkest corners of humanity, the insatiable need to control, to blame, to destroy what we do not understand. And as the crowd surged and shadows writhed, I knew this was only the beginning. I was trapped in a cycle, an endless loop of fear and vengeance, tethered to the very essence of what it meant to be human. The climax loomed, looming like a noose, whispering its chilling promise that the story would continue, unrelenting and unforgiving. The clock on the wall ticks like a metronome, each second an echo of lost opportunities, a heartbeat of desperation. I stand there, in the cramped room that smells of sweat and unwashed linens, where the air feels thick and suffocating, as if the walls themselves are closing in. Maria's voice pierces through the silence, raw and trembling. Why do they get to decide for us, she demands, her fists clenched tight enough that her nails bite into her palms. The weight of her anger is palpable, it hangs in the air, electric, sparking a fire in the dullness of this mundane place. I remember the first time I met Maria. She was a ghost then, slipping through the shadows of our neighborhood, a whisper of laughter trailing behind her like a lost child. Now, her laughter feels like a distant memory, replaced by the echoes of her fight against the unyielding machinery of class and gender that seeks to crush her spirit. The light barely filters through the grimy window, revealing the bruises of her struggle, not just on her skin but etched into her very being. Across the room, Lena sits, her eyes searching the floor as if the answers are buried in the cracked tiles. She's a study in contrasts, softness wrapped in resilience, like a wildflower growing through concrete. They don't see us, she murmurs, her voice a whisper, almost lost in the din of our reality. They see what they want, clean houses, happy families, a perfect facade. But we, her words hang heavy, a noose of truth tightening around us, squeezing the air from our lungs. I remember the nights we spent dreaming of more, mapping out futures on the backs of takeout menus, our laughter mingling with the scent of fried food, a desperate attempt to claw our way out of this cycle. Dreams were our nightly escape, shimmering and fragile, as real as the stars we could never touch. But those stars feel further away tonight, like they're mocking us from a distance that feels insurmountable. Maria bolts to her feet, her chair scraping against the floor, a sound that cuts through the silence like glass shattering. We're not invisible. Not anymore. Her voice rises, a battle cry against the weight of our circumstances. I can feel the adrenaline coursing through me, a surge of hope, but it's mingled with fear, the fear of staying, of fighting, of losing the little pieces of ourselves we've managed to cling to. In this moment, I see the scars on Maria's back, memories of her past flaring in my mind, each one a testament to her survival, her strength. I remember when she nearly gave up, when the weight of rejection and poverty pressed down so hard it threatened to swallow her whole. That was the night I watched her cry, tears cascading like a river over the canyon of her despair. I can't fight anymore, she had whispered, and I had felt the world tilt on its axis, a fragile balance shattered by her pain. Lena looks up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. But what can we do? Her voice trembles, and I can feel the fear that coils around her heart, squeezing it tightly until it gasps for air. They'll never listen. Her words strike like a thunderclap, but they are not enough to drown out the urgent thrumming of my own heart, which beats in time with Maria's rising fury. We rise together, I say, the words spilling from my lips before I can even think. The room seems to hold its breath, waiting. I glimpse the glimmer of something in Maria's eyes, a flicker of recognition, an understanding that perhaps we are not as powerless as we once believed. I remember the stories we told each other about our mothers, the echoes of their voices woven into our fabric, their struggles immortalized in our laughter and tears. My mother used to say that strength is born of fire, Maria had once shared, her voice soft yet fierce, her eyes alight with the memories of her childhood. And we are made of fire. In this moment, the darkness feels less suffocating. I see shadows shifting in the corners, but they no longer terrify me, they are a part of who we are, the haunting reminders of what we've overcome. Together, we are a storm, a cyclone of voices rising against the gale of indifference. Let's show them. Maria stands tall, her presence commanding, her spirit ablaze. Let's make them see us. Her words wrap around me like a warm embrace, igniting a fire I had long thought extinguished. The shadows retreat, cowering as our collective strength begins to rise. I can almost taste the future on my tongue, sweet and bitter all at once, a promise of change, stitched into the fabric of our fight. In that moment, we are unstoppable. We are the wolves howling at the moon, the thunder rumbling across the sky, raw and beautiful. The city outside continues its relentless pulse, unaware of our revolution brewing within these four walls. Yet we know, oh how we know, that the fight for our voices is just beginning. It's a crescendo that will echo through the streets, through the hearts of every woman who has ever felt unheard. I remember the dreams we dared to dream, the future we envisioned through hazy clouds of uncertainty. Together, we will turn those dreams into a reality. The walls may be closing in, but tonight, in this fragile space, we breathe fire. And as the clock continues its steady march, the ticking becomes a heartbeat, our heartbeat, echoing the pulse of our defiance. We will not be silenced. We will not be invisible. The confrontation looms, a tempest gathering strength, but we stand ready, united. In our hearts, the storm swells, promising rain, renewal, revenge. And as we step into the unknown, we do so hand in hand, each heartbeat a promise, this is just the beginning. The market square was alive with chaos, a cacophony of voices echoing off the stone walls like the relentless beating of drums. The air thick with the scent of sweat and spices, a volatile mix that churned in the belly and stung the nostrils. I remember the moment vividly, Aveline, her hands trembling, clutching a basket of herbs, her eyes darting like wild birds seeking refuge. She had just witnessed a man accused of theft, his screams swallowed by the crowd, yet they lingered in her ears, a haunting melody of despair that seemed to thrum beneath the surface of the vibrant market. The sun was a cruel overseer, glaring down on the scene, as if amused by the pitiful spectacle of humanity. "Please, not more blood," she whispered, her voice trembling, the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. Beside her, Elodie, her friend, rolled her eyes, the corners of her mouth twitching in a smirk that barely concealed the fear gnawing at her insides. "They'll always find a reason to spill it, Aveline." "Better you learn now than later," she replied, her tone sharp, but there was an unspoken bond of dread knitting them together. In this urban labyrinth, the shadows stretched long and thin, whispering secrets, entangling their fates. Elodie was fierce, a flame flickering defiantly in the wind, yet even her spirit was dimmed by the harsh reality that loomed over them like a storm cloud. She had lost her father to the plague, a shadow that followed her, a ghost she could never shake off. "I remember when we laughed at death," she said one evening, her voice laced with bitterness. "Now it's the punchline of our lives." The town had its pulse, a rhythm that thrummed beneath the cobblestones, a heartbeat that quickened with every evening's fall as the shadows lengthened and the lanterns flickered to life. But there existed an undercurrent of despair, a fear that curled around their legs like a hungry dog. Every alley whispered of misfortune, every corner held the potential for ruin. Aveline's dreams were filled with visions of open fields, the soft caress of grass beneath her bare feet, the freedom that slipped through her fingers like water. "I remember the feel of the wind," she would say, her voice fading with the memory, lost in the confines of stone walls and watchful eyes. "I remember when no one had to die for the price of bread." Yet, even as the weight of despair threatened to drag them under, there was resilience, too, an ember that refused to be snuffed out. Aveline would often find herself in the herbalist's shop, surrounded by the heady fragrance of dried flowers and roots, the air alive with possibility. "Those who can heal are the true sorcerers," the old woman would say, her voice a rasp, her eyes gleaming like polished glass, reflecting the dreams of those who dared to hope. But there was darkness, too. The butcher's stall loomed nearby, the blooded remnants of his work a grotesque reminder of mortality. As Aveline watched him sharpen his knife, she felt the chill of dread wrap around her like a shroud. What if one day it's us? What if we're the ones on that block? The thought gripped her heart, a vice that tightened with every fleeting moment. Life in the town was a precarious balance, a dance on the edge of a blade. There were whispers about a witch in the woods beyond the town, a spectre who might hold the key to freedom or ruin. Elodie laughed at the idea, but Aveline's heart quickened with curiosity. "What if she could grant us a chance to escape?" she mused, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if she could show us how to turn the tide?" The thought felt like a spark igniting in her chest, a glimmer of hope wedged between the cracks of despair. When twilight draped its cloak over the market, the world transformed. The laughter of children became distant echoes, and the glow of lanterns cast eerie shadows on the cobblestones. Aveline and Elodie found themselves drawn to the edge of the town, a place where the familiar gave way to the unknown, where the witch might exist, a figure cloaked in the night, a soul draped in mystery. "Are you truly ready?" Elodie asked, her bravado slipping as they stepped away from the safety of the town's embrace. "The woods are full of things we might not understand." Aveline grasped her friend's hand, squeezing it tight, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. What's worse, living a life shackled by fear or facing the unknown? As they ventured deeper, the air thickened, the trees closing in around them, suffocating in their silence. The moon hung like a watchful eye, illuminating the path but casting shadows that danced with life. A flash of something, a whisper of fabric, a flicker of movement, caused Aveline's heart to leap. "Did you see that?" she gasped. Elodie rolled her eyes. "It's just the wind, Aveline. Stop being so dramatic." But even she could feel the tension, the electric pulse of something waiting, watching. It felt as if the woods were alive, breathing in sync with their fears, echoing their doubts back at them. Then came the voice, a soft, melodic sound that wrapped around them like a lover's embrace. "Why do you seek me, children of the town?" A figure emerged, draped in shadows, eyes gleaming with a light that seemed to pierce the veil of darkness. The witch stood before them, a figure both terrifying and awe-inspiring, the embodiment of every tale they had ever heard. Aveline's breath caught in her throat. "We want to be free," she whispered, her heart pounding like a war drum. "We want to escape." "Freedom comes at a price," the witch intoned, her voice smooth yet laced with danger. Aveline felt the weight of those words settle over her like a shroud. In that moment, she realized freedom was never simply handed over, it was wrestled from the jaws of fate, shaped by the choices made in the shadows of night. Elodie stepped forward, defiance sparking in her eyes. "We're willing to pay whatever it costs." As the wind howled through the trees, a thrill surged in Aveline's veins. This was it, this was the moment where fear and courage collided, where destiny awaited their choice. But the woods held their breath, and the shadows danced, hinting at a truth yet to be revealed. Freedom was a path strewn with thorns, and love, loss, and sacrifice loomed just beyond the horizon. The air crackled with tension, and as their hearts raced, the witch's gaze pierced through them, probing, searching for the truths they had yet to confront. In that moment, they stood at the precipice of change, caught between the harsh reality of their lives and the flickering embers of hope that refused to die. The weight of their choices settled heavy upon their shoulders, and they understood, this was just the beginning. The town, with its cries and laughter, with its shadows and dreams, would never release them easily. What would they sacrifice to break free? What would they lose in their quest for liberation? The night thickened, wrapping around them like a cloak, the witch's eyes glinting with unspoken promises and threats. And as they faced the unknown, they realized that the greatest danger lay not in the darkness that surrounded them, but in the uncertainties that simmered within their own hearts, waiting to be unleashed. The air crackles with tension, a silence so heavy it could crush bones. In the dim light of the chapel, shadows flicker as candles sputter, illuminating the faces of those gathered, a sea of grief, hope, despair, and flickering belief. I stand in the back, my heart pounding against my ribcage like a caged bird desperate for freedom. Outside, the world is dark, but in here, the flickering flames tell stories, stories of saints, of women who defied a world determined to silence them. A lone figure steps forward, cloaked in humility yet radiating an undeniable intensity. Sister Ilara, a woman whose voice trembles the very foundation of faith. She carries the weight of centuries on her shoulders, the legacy of the female saint swirling around her like an invisible shroud. I remember her eyes, fierce and unyielding, reflecting the flickering light, a mirror to the souls of all who came before her. "What is it to be a woman of faith?" she asks, voice heavy with the ghosts of those who fought, who suffered, who triumphed. I remember the whispers of the past. I remember the cold grip of fear as she speaks of St. Joan of Arc, a warrior wrapped in divine purpose, her voice echoing through the ages. The fire crackling in the hearth feels inadequate compared to the flames that consumed her. She was burned alive, Sister Ilara says, and the words hang like smoke, bitter and acrid. For believing, for daring, for being a woman in a man's world. The room swells with the pulse of her words, each syllable a heartbeat echoing the pain of 1,000 women silenced, tortured, revered. Then there's Miriam, eyes glassy with unshed tears, an embodiment of every soul torn between faith and fear. She sits at the front, clutching a frayed rosary, twisting it like a lifeline. "What if I'm not enough?" she whispers, the question poised like an arrow, sharp and devastating. I see the flicker of doubt in her eyes, like a candle teetering on the brink of extinction. Sister Ilara steps closer, the truth hanging heavy in the air. "Do you think St. Teresa of Avila ever felt enough?" she challenges, voice both soft and fierce, wrapping around Miriam like a warm embrace. She wrote in her meditation that God loves the imperfect. That our scars are not weaknesses but testimonies of survival. The words settle in the room, a fragile thread weaving us all together. Every heartbeat, a reminder that we are not alone. As the candles gutter, shadows dance along the walls, and I'm drawn into the stories of these women, spiritual leaders who walked through fire both literally and metaphorically, leaving behind echoes of strength that resonate through the ages. But then, the atmosphere shifts. Outside, a storm brews, thunder rumbling like the voices of the condemned. Sister Ilara's gaze sharpens, and she raises her voice, fierce as the winds raging beyond the chapel walls. "This is not merely history," she bellows, and I feel the reverberation in my bones. "These women are not relics. They are alive, standing beside us, urging us to rise." Miriam's grip on her rosary tightens, knuckles whitening. "What if I fail?" she cries, fear slicing through her vulnerability like a dagger. "What if I don't live up to their legacy? I see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, the ghost of every woman who ever felt inadequate in a world that demands perfection. Sister Ilara turns to her, fierce and unrelenting. Failure is not the absence of worth, she roars, and I can almost feel the air crackle with her conviction. It is the stepping stone to greatness. Every saint stumbled, every one of them bled. They are our compass, not our prison. In that moment, the storm outside seems to echo our turmoil, a wild cacophony against the walls. I find myself trapped in the maelstrom of emotions, caught between the past and the present, the sacred and the profane. The candles reveal silhouettes of saints, Joan, Teresa, Hildegard, etched into the stone, watching, judging, guiding. I remember the stories. The tales woven through the threads of time, the blood and tears spilled like ink on parchment. Legends of women who shouted against the storm, refusing to be drowned by the patriarchal tides that sought to silence them. They were rebels, lovers, warriors, not just names in dusty tomes but spirits igniting the hearts of those who dare to look beyond the veil of history. The tension peaks, and just as the storm surges, so does the emotion in the room. Sister Ilara's voice rises above the thunder, a clarion call resonating like a battle cry. No more. No more silence. Every word is a strike against the chains that bind us. In the darkness, I feel something shift inside me, a spark igniting in the depths of my soul. I am not just a spectator, I am a participant in this legacy. The pulse of our shared experience thrums like a heartbeat, raw and tangible. Miriam stands, trembling but resolute. I will honor them, she declares, her voice breaking through the tumult, a fragile flower breaking through concrete. I will not let their stories die. And in that moment, the air is electric, charged with potential, the potential for change, for awakening, for rebellion against the mundane. Sister Ilara nods, her expression softening, yet filled with the fire of commitment. Then let us rise together, she says, and I see the flicker of hope in her gaze, a flame that refuses to be extinguished. Let us carry their legacy, not as burdens, but as wings. Outside, the storm howls, but within these walls, we are a tempest of our own, intense, unyielding, fierce. The legacy of female sense is not just a history lesson, it's a living testament to resilience, a reminder that we, too, can stand against the raging winds. The clock ticks loudly, but time feels irrelevant in this moment. We exist in a perpetual heartbeat, an unbroken circle of spirit and strength. The night stretches on, each heartbeat echoing the stories we share, the fears we face, the legacy we embrace. There is no end here, only a continuous flow of emotions, a ceaseless pulse that binds us to those who have come before. And as the candles flicker, a reminder whispers in the air, the legacy of female saints is eternal, alive in every breath, every heartbeat, every act of defiance. The room was thick with silence, an eerie stillness that wrapped around Ilara like a suffocating shroud. She stood frozen, her breath hitching in her throat as she peered out the window into the night. Shadows danced among the trees, twisting like whispered secrets, and the moon hung low, casting ghostly light that illuminated the stark reality of her situation. A sharp knock shattered the quiet, and her heart thundered, a primal drum echoing the chaotic thought swirling in her mind. "Let me in." It was Maris, her voice laced with urgency, no longer the confident woman who had strolled into her life with a smile that could crack the darkest nights. "Please, Ilara." Ilara's fingers trembled, curling around the cool metal of the window latch. Memories washed over her like a tide, an overwhelming flood of laughter and warmth mixed with the sting of betrayal. I remember the way we used to talk for hours, unearthing dreams beneath the stars, our souls laid bare like pages in a book. But desire, raw and relentless, had twisted their bond, and now they stood on the precipice, the chasm of unspoken words yawning wide between them. "Open the door." Maris's voice was a plea, wavering, fragile. Ilara hesitated, torn between the yearning for connection and the gnawing fear of vulnerability. She could feel the weight of their shared history pressing down on her, the bitter taste of unfulfilled desires lingering in the air between them. The door creaked open, a slow betrayal of her own resolve. Maris stumbled in, her eyes wild, cheeks flushed as if she had been running from something darker than the night itself. "I came to find you," she gasped, each word a fragile thread connecting them, even as the tension sparked like static electricity. "Did you?" Ilara's voice was sharp, slicing through the thick atmosphere. "Or did you come to remind me of everything I can't have?" Meris stepped closer, the space between them fraught with unacknowledged feelings, a pulsing current that seemed to thrum in the air. "It's not that simple," she exclaimed, her hands gesturing wildly, as if trying to grasp the inescapable truth that danced just out of reach. "I need you to understand, I understand too well." Ilara's eyes blazed, a storm of emotions crashing within her. She felt the ghost of a dream fluttering just beyond her grasp, a memory of what could have been, two women entwined beneath a moonlit sky, their hearts beating in time with the universe. But that dream was shackled by the reality of the world, a world that whispered of shame and expectations, of roles they were expected to play. "Sometimes," Meris said, her voice softening to a whisper, "the thing we desire most is the thing that scares us the most." Ilara's heart wrenched at the truth of it. The terror of disappointment, of rejection, loomed large, a specter that haunted her every thought. But desire was a powerful force, a wild creature that roamed free within her, clawing at the confines of her heart. She remembered nights spent in secret, their laughter echoing in stolen moments, the thrill of touch that ignited a fire in her soul. "Tell me you haven't felt it too," Meris implored, stepping closer still, the air thickening with unspoken words. "Tell me you haven't wanted me." Ilara's breath caught, a confession hanging heavy on her lips. The truth trembled there, a delicate bird afraid to take flight. "I remember," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "the way your laughter felt like sunlight in a darkened room, the way your touch ignited something deep inside me. Then why are we standing here, caught in this web of expectations?" Meris's voice was fierce now, a wildfire threatening to consume them both. "Why can't we be honest about what we want?" Honesty. The word echoed in Ilara's mind, a siren song that tugged at her heart. She remembered the faces of those who had loved her, who had whispered sweet nothings only to vanish when the world demanded conformity. But here stood Meris, wild and untamed, a force of nature that dared to challenge the norm. A part of Ilara yearned to reach out, to bridge the chasm between them with raw honesty and vulnerability. But fear gripped her, cold and unyielding. "I want," she started, but the words were swallowed by doubt. "Want what?" Meris urged, her voice cutting through the darkness like a beacon. The intensity in her gaze ignited something deep within Ilara, a flicker of hope against the overwhelming tide of fear. "I want to feel alive." Ilara's voice burst forth like a dam breaking, and the tears spilled down her cheeks, hot and fierce. "I want to take off this mask and scream into the void. I want to dance with you under the stars and let the world see us." "Then let's do it." Meris stepped forward, her hands reaching out, fingers brushing against Ilara's trembling jaw. "Let's tear down these walls and embrace the chaos of who we are." A heartbeat passed, heavy with possibility. In that moment, everything hung in the balance, fragile as gossamer threads, ready to snap under the weight of their shared fears. The world outside continued on, oblivious, while they stood at the edge of their own universe, shadows flickering around them, time frozen in the electric charge of desire and longing. Ilara remembered dreams of a life lived boldly, not in the shadows of fear, but in the blazing light of authenticity. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the moment, feeling Meris's warmth seep into her skin, a balm to her weary heart. Here, in this fragile sanctuary, they could be more than mere reflections of society's expectations, they could be the architects of their own desires, the authors of their own stories. But would courage rise in the face of their ghosts? Would they dare to leap into the unknown, hand in hand, hearts bare? The answer hovered in the air, a whisper on the breeze, a promise of something beautiful, hauntingly alive. The clock ticked softly in the background, each second a reminder that they were running out of time, yet infinite in their possibilities. The tension coiled tighter around them, an unbroken thread of longing and fear, binding them together in the eerie stillness of the night. And as the moon cast its silvery light upon them, they stood on the precipice, ready to leap into the dark unknown, where desire and agency intertwined, where the echoes of their hearts danced with the shadows of the past. The silence is deafening, a heavy blanket smothering the air, thick with unspoken stories. A cracked skull grins up from the dirt, a forgotten relic of what once was. The sun hangs low, casting elongated shadows that twist and contort like the memories of the women who once walked here. I stand, heart pounding, in the middle of an excavation site, a patch of earth that could cradle the voices of countless forgotten souls. I can almost hear them whispering, a cacophony of laughter and rage, dreams and despair, echoing through time. Myra kneels beside me, her fingers trembling as she brushes away the dust from the fragile remains. She's a firebrand, eyes alight with passion but haunted by a choice she made long ago, a choice that still wraps its fingers around her throat like a noose. "Do you think they were happy?" she asks, her voice barely above a whisper, as if fearing the ghosts might hear her. I want to tell her that happiness is a fleeting shadow, an illusion we chase like phantoms. But instead, I find myself lost in her gaze, a mix of determination and despair. "Happy?" I echo, biting back the bitterness that bubbles up. They wore their lives like armor, heavy, cold. They fought battles we can't even begin to imagine. Each word is a dagger, piercing the veil of our present, reminding us of the scars that history has carved into the earth. Nearby, Thomas stands, the archaeologist with an insatiable thirst for truth, but the truth is a treacherous beast. "Look at this," he calls, holding up a delicate pendant, glinting in the waning light. A woman's adornment. Could it have been a symbol of power, or perhaps a token of love? His excitement is palpable, but I see the shadows flickering behind his eyes. He's wrestling with his own demons, the weight of expectation and ambition, the desperation to unearth stories that refuse to be told. I remember my own dreams, shattered like glass underfoot. I was once a student, bright-eyed and fervent, believing that I could rewrite the narratives of women long gone. But academia is a labyrinth, and somewhere along the way, I lost my way. Now, as I stand here, the echoes of their lives bleed into mine, intertwining our fates. You think that's all they left behind? Trinkets and tales. I spit out, the bitterness seeping through the cracks. What about the blood, the sweat, the tears? What about the wars they wage daily against their own existence? Myra nods, her brow furrowed, as if grappling with the weight of my words. What if they were warriors? What if their stories are written in the scars of the earth? She leans closer, almost as if she can see the ghosts. Every life lived is a battle fought, isn't it? I want to scream, to claw at the soil and unearth the buried memories that twist and writhe beneath our feet. This isn't just archaeology, it's resurrection. Each fragment of pottery, each tooth, each rusted pendant is a testament to lives lived in defiance, lives that burned bright against the odds. They were not just wives or daughters, I say, the urgency creeping into my voice. They were creators, dreamers, rebels. They bore the weight of worlds on their shoulders, and we owe them. The sun dips lower, casting a crimson hue across the site, wrapping us in a tapestry of shadows that flicker like candle flames. The air thickens with tension, and I can feel Thomas's eyes on me. "You're looking for something that isn't there," he says, his voice a knife edge between doubt and understanding. "You want them to be more than they were." My heart races. No, I want them to be seen. To be heard. I want their stories to scream from the rooftops, to drown out the silence that has suffocated them for centuries. I can feel the electric pull of the moment, the crackling anticipation of truths yet to be unveiled. A breeze stirs, and I shiver, caught in this web of history, this haunting ballet of the past. I think of the women who lived and loved and fought within these walls, their laughter echoing against the stones, their cries piercing the night. "There's a ghost here," I whisper, almost afraid to say it aloud. A woman, perhaps. She's waiting. Waiting for us to unearth her story. Myra's hand trembles as she grips mine, and I see the flicker of fear in her eyes. What if she doesn't want to be found? What if she's content in her silence? I close my eyes, envisioning her. What if silence is a cage? What if her voice is a river, waiting for us to breach the dam? Time stretches and contorts, like a sinewy thread weaving through our lives, binding us to the past in ways we are only beginning to understand. I can almost see the women, shades of memory flickering about us, drawing us closer. They are more than relics, they are the fragments of our souls, the woven fabric of our existence. In this fevered moment, I feel the walls around us pulse with life. The stones thrum like a heartbeat, the earth sighs beneath our feet. It's as if history itself is waiting for us to take our next breath, to inhale their stories, to exhale our own fears. Can you feel it? I ask, my voice breaking with emotion. They're here, Myra. They're all around us, leaning in, desperate for their voices to be heard. Myra straightens, her resolve hardening, the fire igniting once more in her core. Then let's give them a voice. Let's raise our voices louder than the silence. The night deepens, wrapping us in its inky embrace, and I feel the thrill of something profound unfolding. Time slips and sways, and I realize, this is not the end. It's just a beginning, a whisper in the grand chorus of existence. The ghosts of yesterday linger, and we are but vessels, carriers of their stories. Their truth will rise, and with it, the heartbeats of those who dare to defy the shadows will echo in eternity. And as the stars twinkle above, I know we will never stop searching, never stop fighting, for their voices deserve to be heard.